My son thought a sticky note on the kitchen counter was enough to dismiss me. He wrote, "Don't expect me to take care of you in your old age because I have my own life and family." He thought he was closing the door on a burden. He did not realize he was locking himself out of a fortune. He suggested I sell my home and move into a nursing home called Shady Acres so he could have my space. He mistook my silence for weakness and my generosity for obligation. By sunrise, he would learn that the hand that fed him for 30 years could also starve him in a single day. My name is Caleb Hayes. I am 68 years old, a man who built engines for major automotive companies for 3 decades and built a real estate empire in the shadows for 2 more. But to my son Kendrick and his wife Courtney, I was just an old furniture piece that needed to be moved to the curb to make room for their ambition. Before I tell you how I dismantled his entire life in 24 hours, tell me in the comments if you believe loyalty is dead in this generation. Hit subscribe if you enjoy seeing justice served cold. Now let me tell you about the longest night of my life. It was a Tuesday evening when the illusion of my family finally shattered. I had just returned from the hospital after a long series of tests. The doctors were concerned about a shadow on my lung, a false alarm as it turned out, but it put me in a vulnerable state of mind. I walked into my Brooklyn brownstone, the house I had bought 40 years ago when this neighborhood was nothing but grit and struggle. Now it was worth millions, a fortress of history that I had preserved with my own hands. The house was dark, not the comforting kind of dark that signals rest, but a hollow, cold darkness. I expected Kendrick to be there. He and Courtney had been staying in the guest suite on the 3rd floor for 6 months while their luxury condo was being renovated. I called out his name, but my voice just bounced off the high ceilings and mahogany paneling. No answer. The silence was heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I walked into the kitchen, placing my keys on the granite island. That was when I saw it. A yellow sticky note stuck casually to the coffee maker. It was such a small, insignificant piece of paper. It fluttered slightly as the air conditioning kicked on. I turned on the pendant light and leaned in to read it. I recognized Kendrick's handwriting immediately. It was jagged and rushed the handwriting of a man who was too busy for courtesy. The note read, "Dad, we need to talk, but I do not have time tonight. Courtney and I discussed it. Don't expect us to be your caregivers. We have our own lives and careers to focus on. You need to start looking at assisted living facilities. Shady Acres has an opening. We think it is best if you sell the brownstone so we can use the equity to expand Kendrick Creative. We will be back tomorrow to help you pack." I read it once, then I read it again. I felt a physical blow to my chest, harder than any heart attack could ever be. It was not just the selfishness. It was the casual cruelty of it. He did not even have the courage to look me in the eye. He left a note next to the coffee machine like a reminder to buy milk or pay the electric bill. He was evicting me from my own life with a post-it note. I stood there for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance down towards Atlantic Avenue. My hands were gripping the edge of the granite counter so hard my knuckles turned the color of ash. I looked around the kitchen. I had renovated this room 5 years ago because Courtney complained the old stove was an eyesore. I looked at the Viking range that cost more than my first car. I looked at the imported tiles. Every inch of this house held a memory of my sacrifice, and now they wanted to liquidate it to fund their vanity. Most fathers would cry. I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes, the hot pressure of betrayal, but I refused to let them fall. Crying is for those who have hope that things can be fixed. I knew in that moment that nothing could be fixed. The bridge was not just burned, it was incinerated. I walked over to the liquor cabinet in the study. I bypassed the cheap stuff and reached for the bottle of Pappy Van Winkle that I had been saving for Kendrick's wedding day, a bottle I never opened because Courtney said brown liquor was for old men. I poured myself 3 fingers neat. My hand did not shake, not even a tremor. I was surprised by my own calm. It was the calm of a man who realizes he has nothing left to lose. I took the glass to my desk and sat down in my leather armchair. On the desk sat a framed photograph. It was taken the day Kendrick graduated from private school. I was standing next to him wearing my blue work uniform because I had come straight from the plant. He looked embarrassed to be seen with me. I had paid $40,000 a year for that embarrassment. I looked at his smile in the photo. It was the same smile he used when he asked for a down payment on his car and the same smile he used when he asked me to pay for his wedding. I realized then that I had not raised a son. I had raised a parasite. and I was the host. I took a sip of the bourbon. It burned, going down a cleansing fire. I picked up the photograph and placed it face down on the desk. That was the moment Caleb the father died and Caleb the businessman woke up. In business, when an asset becomes a liability, you do not cry over it. You liquidate it. You cut your losses. You protect the core business. I was the core business. I looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. It was 11:30 at night. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I did not call Kendrick. I did not call Courtney to beg for mercy. I scrolled past their names. I searched for a number I had not used in years, but one that every property owner in Brooklyn keeps handy. I dialed the number for emergency locksmith services. A groggy voice answered on the third ring. "Department of Security, how can I help you?" "I need a full rekey," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, rough like gravel. "Sir, it is almost midnight," the dispatcher said. "It will cost triple the standard rate for an after-hours call. Can it wait until morning?" I took another sip of bourbon. Money. They always think it is about money. They did not know that tonight money was the only weapon I had left. "No," I said. "It cannot wait. I have a security breach. I need every external door changed. Front, back, and the basement entrance. I want high-security deadbolts, and I want it done within the hour. I will pay quadruple if you get a van here in 20 minutes. There was a pause on the other end. The promise of cash woke the man up. "I will have a technician there in 15. I hung up. I sat in the dark listening to the house breathe. I imagined Kendrick and Courtney sleeping in their hotel room or wherever they were staying, probably laughing about how they handled the old man. They probably thought I was upstairs crying, packing my bags, accepting my fate like a good, obedient, obsolete machine. They thought they had checkmated me. They forgot that I was the one who taught them how to play the game. 20 minutes later, the blue lights of the locksmith van flashed through the front bay window. I opened the door. The technician was a young man, heavy-set, looking confused to see an old man in a silk robe holding a glass of bourbon standing in the doorway of a $3 million home. "You locked out, sir?" he asked, looking at the keys in my hand. "No," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "I am locking someone out." He did not ask any more questions. He went to work. The sound of the drill biting into the brass of the front door was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. It screamed as it bored into the metal, shredding the old tumblers. Those old locks had welcomed Kendrick home from college. They had opened for Courtney when she moved her boxes in. Now they were being drilled out, destroyed, erased. I watched the metal shavings fall onto the hardwood floor. They glittered like gold dust. The young man worked fast. He replaced the vintage brass hardware with modern heavy-duty smart locks, the kind that required a code, a fingerprint, and a physical key. While he worked on the back door, I went to the kitchen and packed a box. I did not pack my things. I packed Kendrick's things that he had left scattered around the living room. His golf clubs that were leaning against the fireplace, his iPad, his jacket. I put them all in a pile on the front porch. The locksmith finished at 2 in the morning. He handed me the new set of keys. They were heavy, cold, and sharp. "You are all set, boss," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Nobody is getting in here unless you want them to." I handed him a stack of cash, counting out $1,200. He nodded, tipped his cap, and walked out into the cool night air. I stood in the doorway for a moment. The street was quiet. The brownstones across the way were dark, their occupants sleeping soundly, unaware of the war that had just been declared on their block. I looked at the pile of Kendrick's belongings on the porch. I kicked his golf bag slightly with my slipper. Then I stepped back inside. I closed the heavy oak door. I turned the new deadbolt. Click. The sound echoed with a finality that vibrated in my bones. I slid the new chain lock into place. I engaged the floor bolt. I was sealed in. They were sealed out. I went back to the kitchen and looked at the sticky note one last time. I took a lighter from the drawer, the one I used to light candles for birthday cakes. I held the flame to the corner of the yellow paper. I watched the fire curl the edges, turning Kendrick's cruel words into black ash. I dropped it into the sink and watched it burn until there was nothing left but a smear of soot. I rinsed the sink, then I went to bed. For the first time in months, I slept like a baby. I needed my rest, because tomorrow morning the war would truly begin, and I intended to be the last man standing. The morning sun hit the pavement of my Brooklyn street at exactly 7 o'clock. It was the kind of Tuesday morning that usually signaled the start of a routine day for a retired man. The garbage trucks were grinding their gears a few blocks over, and the smell of roasted coffee beans drifted from the overpriced cafe on the corner. Inside my house, the silence was absolute. I sat in my wingback chair by the front bay window, a fresh cup of black coffee in my hand. It was a dark roast, bitter and strong, just the way I had learned to drink it during double shifts at the assembly plant in Detroit 30 years ago. I was not wearing my usual worn-out cardigan. Today I was dressed in a pressed button-down shirt and my best slacks. I had shaved. I had shined my shoes. A man does not go into battle in his pajamas. I looked down at the new set of silver keys resting on the mahogany side table. They gleamed in a shaft of sunlight. Those keys were the only difference between yesterday and today, but they changed the entire physics of my world. Yesterday this house was a hotel for my ungrateful son. Today it was a fortress. I checked my watch, 7:15. Kendrick was predictable, if nothing else. He liked to beat the morning traffic into Manhattan, and he would want to pick up his golf clubs before his 10 o'clock meeting. I took a slow sip of coffee. The warmth spread through my chest, settling the nerves that I refused to acknowledge were there. I was not nervous about the confrontation. I was nervous about whether I would have the discipline to stick to the script I had written in my head. Then I saw it. The black luxury SUV turned the corner. It was a massive vehicle, shiny and aggressive, leased entirely in my name because Kendrick claimed his credit score was temporarily bruised by a business misunderstanding. He parked right in front of the fire hydrant. He always parked there. He believed rules were for other people, for the little people who did not have important creative director jobs or fathers to pay their tickets. I watched through the sheer curtains. Kendrick stepped out first. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He looked sharp, successful, and completely hollow. Courtney climbed out of the passenger side. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a cup of coffee from that expensive chain she loved. She looked at my house not with affection, but with the critical eye of an appraiser. I could practically hear her calculating the square footage and imagining how much better the facade would look if they sandblasted the 100-year-old brick. They walked up the stone steps. I did not move. I just watched. I wanted to savor this moment. This was the last moment of their ignorance. I heard the heavy footsteps on the porch. Then came the sound of metal on metal. Kendrick was sliding his key into the lock. I held my breath. He turned it. Or rather, he tried to turn it. I heard the jingle of keys as he pulled it out. He looked at it frowning. He wiped the key on his pants leg, thinking it was dirty. He inserted it again. He twisted it harder this time. The new deadbolt did not budge. It was solid, hardened steel installed by a man who charged triple time for perfection. "What is wrong with this thing?" I heard Kendrick mutter. His voice was muffled by the thick oak door, but the annoyance was clear. Courtney sighed loudly. "You probably have the wrong key, Kendrick. Try the other one." "I tried both," he snapped. "It is stuck. The old man probably let the lock rust out. I told you this place was falling apart." He jiggled the handle. He pushed his shoulder against the wood. The door held firm. It did not even rattle. Then the pounding started. Bam! 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 Dad, Kendrick shouted. "Dad, open up. The lock is jammed." I stood up slowly. I placed my coffee cup on the coaster. I walked to the hallway mirror and straightened my collar. I did not rush. Let him knock. Let his knuckles bruise against the reality of his new situation. Bam! 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 "Dad, are you in there?" he yelled again. His voice was losing its professional veneer. It was becoming the whine of a spoiled child. I reached the door. I did not unlock the deadbolt immediately. I waited until he kicked the bottom of the door in frustration. "Open the damn door!" Courtney screeched. "We are going to be late!" I turned the thumb turn of the deadbolt. The click was loud and precise. I opened the door, but only 4 inches. The heavy brass security chain I had installed caught the door, snapping it to a halt. Through the narrow gap I saw Kendrick's face. It was red and sweaty. He looked confused, staring at the chain that barred his entry. "Dad, what is this?" he asked, gesturing at the chain. "Why is the chain on? Open the door. I need my clubs." I looked at him. I looked at Courtney standing behind him with her arms crossed. I did not smile. My face was a mask of stone. "Good morning, Kendrick," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of any warmth. "Good morning," he huffed, trying to push the door, but the chain held fast. "Seriously, Dad, let us in." The lock was sticking. You need to get that fixed before you sell the place. There is nothing wrong with the lock, I said. I had them changed last night. Kendrick froze. Changed, he repeated. Why would you change the locks? Do you know how inconvenient that is? Give me the new key. I am running late. No, I said. The word hung in the air between us. It was a small word, but it had the weight of a sledgehammer. Excuse me. Courtney stepped forward, pulling her sunglasses down her nose to glare at me. Did you just say no? Kendrick needs his property. You cannot keep us out of our own house. This is not your house, Courtney, I said, shifting my gaze to her. This is the residence of Caleb Hayes, and according to the note your husband left on my kitchen counter, you have your own life and family to attend to. I saw the realization flicker in Kendrick's eyes. He remembered the note. But instead of shame, I saw anger. He felt entitled to his cruelty. Dad, that note was about the future, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. It was about making realistic plans. Do not be dramatic. Now, open the door. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled yellow sticky note. I had fished it out of the sink before I burned it, deciding it was better used as a shield than as ash. I held it up to the crack in the door. I am simply following your instructions, I said. You resigned from your position as my son. I accepted your resignation. Oh my God, Courtney groaned, throwing her hands in the air. He is having an episode. Kendrick, I told you. He is senile. He does not even know what he is doing. I know exactly what I am doing, Courtney, I said sharply. I am protecting my peace, and I am protecting my assets. Since you are so concerned about my mental state, surely you would agree that a confused old man should not be opening his door to strangers. Strangers? Kendrick shouted. He slammed his hand against the wood again. I am your son. I have lived here on and off for 30 years. My golf clubs are in the hallway, my winter coats are in the closet. You are holding my property hostage. Your property, I asked. You mean the clubs I paid for? The coats I bought? I paid for those, Kendrick lied. With the supplemental credit card I pay off every month, I corrected him. Technically, everything inside this house was purchased with my money. So until you can produce a receipt with your name on it and a bank statement showing the funds came from your account, nothing leaves this house. This is illegal, Courtney screamed. She was stepping closer to the door now, her expensive perfume wafting through the cracks, smelling like vanilla and greed. You cannot do this. We have residency rights. We have been staying here for 6 months. You have to evict us legally. I smiled then. It was a cold, thin smile. Actually, Courtney, under New York state law, a guest who pays no rent and has no lease agreement can be removed at the owner's discretion if they threaten the safety or emotional well-being of the homeowner. Your note threatened my well-being. It caused me significant distress. So consider your guest privileges revoked. Kendrick looked like he was going to explode. He grabbed the door frame and shook it. I am not playing games with you, old man, he spat. Open this door right now or I am calling the police. I will tell them you have lost your mind. I will tell them you are a danger to yourself. I will have you committed to Shady Acres by tonight if you do not let me in. There it was, the threat. The mask had fallen off completely. He was not a son concerned for his father. He was a predator angry that his prey had grown teeth. Go ahead, I said. Call them. I closed the door. I slid the deadbolt back into place. I did not walk away immediately. I stood with my back against the cool wood of the door. I listened. I heard Kendrick swearing. I heard Courtney urging him on. Do it, she hissed. Call 911. Tell them he is holding our stuff. Tell them he is having a breakdown. We can use the police report to get power of attorney later. I heard the beep of a phone being dialed. Hello, 911. Kendrick's voice changed instantly. It became shaky, fearful, the voice of a concerned victim. Yes, please, I need help. I am at 420 Clinton Avenue. My father, he is having a mental health crisis. He has locked himself in and he has stolen my property. I am afraid he might hurt himself. Yes, please hurry. He is acting very aggressive. I listened to him lie. Every word was a nail in the coffin of our relationship. He was not just trying to get his golf clubs. He was trying to dismantle my life. He was trying to take away my autonomy, my freedom, and my dignity, just so he could get control of a building. I pushed myself off the door. I walked back into the living room. My coffee was still warm. I sat back down in my wingback chair. I picked up the cup and took another sip. Outside, I could hear Kendrick pacing on the porch, his footsteps heavy and angry. Let the police come. Let the neighbors watch. Let the whole world see. I was not the victim here. I was the architect of their downfall, and the foundation had just been poured. I sat and waited for the sirens, my heart beating slow and steady like a war drum. The sound of sirens in Brooklyn is usually just background noise, a rhythm of the city that you learn to ignore after 40 years, but this time the wail was for me. I sat in my wingback chair and watched the red and blue lights bounce off the high ceilings of my living room. They cut through the morning sun like a warning. Outside, I could hear the commotion growing. It was not just the police, it was the audience. In a neighborhood like this one, where property values have skyrocketed and the demographics have shifted, the arrival of a police cruiser in front of a well-maintained brownstone is a spectator sport. The new neighbors came out. These were the people who had moved in over the last decade, the young professionals with their jogging strollers and their rescue dogs and their overpriced lattes. They stood on their stoops, peering over their wrought iron fences. I saw Mrs. Higgins from next door clutching her robe tight around her chest, whispering to her husband. They looked at my house, then they looked at Kendrick and Courtney, and then they looked at the front door where the angry black man supposedly lived. I knew exactly what they were seeing. They saw a handsome young man in a bespoke suit looking distraught. They saw a petite woman in designer clothes looking terrified, and inside they imagined a threat. Kendrick knew this too. He was counting on it. I watched through the sheer curtains as he ran up to the first police car that pulled up. He was waving his arms, not in anger but in a performance of desperation. He pointed at the house. He pointed at his chest. He wiped a fake tear from his eye. He was playing the role of the century, the devoted son dealing with a father who had lost his mind. 2 officers stepped out of the vehicle. One was white young, probably a rookie who looked ready to kick down a door. The other was black, older, with gray at his temples and the tired eyes of a man who had seen every lie New York City had to offer. That was Officer Davis. I did not know him personally, but I knew his type. He was a man who respected facts, not tears. Kendrick was talking a mile a minute. I could not hear every word through the glass, but I could read his body language. He was selling the narrative. He gestured to the door, claiming he lived there. He gestured to the golf clubs that I had left on the porch, claiming he had been kicked out illegally. Courtney stood by his side, nodding vigorously, playing the victim, clutching her purse like she was afraid I was going to burst out and snatch it. The rookie officer had his hand resting near his belt, looking up at my windows with suspicion. The neighbors were murmuring now. I could see the judgment in their eyes. To them, I was just the old man who refused to sell the grumpy relic who did not fit into their vision of a trendy neighborhood. They probably thought Kendrick was a saint for putting up with me. It was time. I did not run out. I did not shout. I picked up the navy blue leather folder that had been sitting on my desk for years. I checked my reflection in the mirror one last time. I buttoned my suit jacket. I walked to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. The sound of the lock turning was sharp and loud. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The morning air was crisp. The silence that fell over the street was immediate. Kendrick stopped mid-sentence. Courtney froze. The neighbors stopped whispering. "Sir, step away from the door and keep your hands where I can see them." The rookie officer barked, his hand moving to his radio. I did not flinch. I walked slowly to the edge of the top step. I looked down at them from my elevated position. I held the folder in my left hand. My right hand was open and relaxed by my side. "Good morning, officers," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the small yard. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. This young man seems to be under the impression that he owns this property." Kendrick lunged forward, but Officer Davis held him back with a single firm hand. "He is crazy," Kendrick shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He is having a dementia episode. He changed the locks illegally. He is holding my property hostage. You need to arrest him or take him to the hospital." Officer Davis looked up at me. He studied my face. He saw the fresh shave. He saw the pressed suit. He saw the clear, steady gaze of a man who was fully in control of his faculties. He did not see a dementia patient. He saw a man who was tired of nonsense. "Sir, are you Caleb Hayes?" Officer Davis asked, his voice calm and professional. "I am," I replied. "This man claims he resides here and that you have illegally evicted him. Is that true?" I walked down the steps slowly. The click of my dress shoes on the stone was the only sound. I stopped 3 feet away from them. I did not look at Kendrick. I looked directly at Officer Davis. "Officer, my son does not reside here. He is a guest who has overstayed his welcome. But more importantly, he seems to be confused about the ownership of this building." I handed the blue folder to Officer Davis. "Inside you will find the deed to this property," I said. "You will also find the trust documents for the Esther Hayes Family Trust. My late wife established this trust 20 years ago. I am the sole trustee. The beneficiary is the trust itself until my death. Nowhere in these documents does the name Kendrick Hayes appear as an owner or a tenant. Kendrick's face went pale. That is a lie, he stammered. Mom left that house to me. Officer Davis opened the folder. He adjusted his glasses. He took his time. He read the deed. He read the trust clauses. He looked at the notarized signature from 20 years ago. Then he looked at the recent utility bills I had included all in my name. He looked at the property tax receipts, all paid by me. The silence stretched on for what felt like an hour. Courtney was chewing on her lip, looking nervously at the neighbors who were now leaning in closer, trying to hear the verdict. The narrative was shifting. The poor young couple was starting to look less like victims and more like intruders. Officer Davis closed the folder with a snap. He looked at Kendrick. The look was not one of sympathy. It was a look of deep, profound disappointment. It was the look a black father gives to a black son who has lost his way, who has forgotten the code of respect, who is trying to hustle the very man who gave him life. It was a look of absolute disdain. Mr. Hayes, the officer said, addressing Kendrick, his voice dropping an octave. According to these legal documents, you have no claim to this property. You are not on the deed. You are not on a lease. You are a guest, and the owner has the right to revoke guest privileges at any time. But I have lived here for 6 months. Kendrick protested, his voice cracking like a teenager. My stuff is inside. Then I suggest you make arrangements to retrieve your items at a time that is convenient for the owner, Officer Davis said. But right now you are trespassing, and if you continue to create a disturbance, I will have to place you in the back of that car. Do we understand each other? The rookie officer relaxed his stance, looking from the documents to Kendrick, realizing he had almost been played. The neighbors started to whisper again, but the tone had changed. They were pointing at Kendrick now. The shame was shifting. It was moving from the porch to the sidewalk, settling heavily on the shoulders of the man in the expensive suit who tried to steal his father's house. Kendrick opened his mouth to argue, but Courtney grabbed his arm. Her nails dug into his expensive jacket. Let is go, Kendrick, she hissed. This is embarrassing. People are filming. I looked, and sure enough, a few phones were held up, capturing the downfall of the golden couple. Fine, Kendrick spat, fixing his tie. We are leaving. But you will be hearing from my lawyer. This is not over. He turned to storm off towards his massive black SUV parked in front of the hydrant. He pulled out his key fob and beeped the locks. The lights on the truck flashed. He reached for the handle. One moment, officers, I said. My voice stopped them in their tracks. Kendrick froze his hand on the door handle. Officer Davis turned back to me, raising an eyebrow. Is there something else, Mr. Hayes? Yes, I said. I pointed a finger at the shiny black luxury truck. That vehicle. What about it? Kendrick snapped. It is my car. Is it? I asked. Or is it leased under the name of Hayes Automotive Consulting? Kendrick laughed a nervous, dry sound. That is your company, Dad. You let me use it. It is my car. I turned to Officer Davis. Officer, I am the sole proprietor of Hayes Automotive Consulting. I have not authorized this individual to use that company vehicle. In fact, given his behavior today and his threats against me, I am formally reporting that vehicle as being used without the owner's consent. I would like it returned to the company immediately. Officer Davis looked at me, then he looked at the car. He walked over to the hood and placed his hand on it. Run the plates, he said to the rookie. The rookie spoke into his radio. A moment later, the radio crackled back, confirming exactly what I said. The vehicle was registered to a corporation owned by Caleb Hayes. Kendrick was shaking now. You cannot do this. I have a meeting at 10. I need to get to the office. Courtney has a lunch date. We need the car. You should have thought about that before you tried to have me committed, I said simply. Officer Davis shook his head. Step away from the vehicle, son. You cannot drive it. It is not yours. But how are we supposed to leave? Courtney shrieked. We are in the middle of Brooklyn. You want us to walk. There is a subway station 2 blocks over, I said. Or you can call a cab. But you are not taking my truck. Officer Davis picked up his radio. Dispatch, send a tow for a recovered unauthorized vehicle at 420 Clinton. No, Kendrick shouted. No, do not tow it. Just let me park it. Step away, form the vehicle. Officer Davis ordered, his hand resting near his handcuffs. Kendrick backed away, his hands in the air, surrendering. Courtney looked like she was going to vomit. She looked at the SUV, then at her high heels, then at the dirty sidewalk. 10 minutes later, a flatbed truck turned the corner. The driver was a big man with a beard. He did not care about the drama. He just wanted to do his job. He backed the truck up to the SUV. I stood on the porch and watched. Kendrick and Courtney stood on the curb, huddled together like refugees from a luxury disaster. The driver hooked the chains onto the axle of the SUV. The metal clanked loudly. Then the winch started to whine. Slowly, agonizingly, the massive black symbol of Kendrick's success was lifted into the air. The tires left the ground. The suspension creaked. It was tilted up at a 45-degree angle, exposing the undercarriage. It looked helpless. I looked at Courtney's face. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the car. That car was her chariot. It was how she arrived at parties. It was how she looked down on people at stoplights. Now it was being dragged away like a piece of junk. Her face crumbled. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the raw panic of someone who realizes their status is built on borrowed time and someone else's money. Kendrick was not looking at the car. He was looking at me. His eyes were filled with hate, pure and undiluted. But behind the hate, there was fear. He was realizing for the first time that I was not just his dad. I was the man who held the keys to his entire existence, and I had just locked him out. The tow truck driver secured the chains and hopped into the cab. He honked his horn once and pulled away. The SUV bounced slightly on the flatbed as it disappeared down the street, carrying with it their last shred of dignity. Officer Davis tipped his hat to me. "Have a good day, Mr. Hayes. Call us if they return." "They won't," I said. I watched them standing there on the sidewalk alone. No car, no house, no plan. A taxi finally pulled up, and they scrambled into it, fighting over who would open the door. As they drove away, I did not feel guilt. I felt lighter. The parasites had been detached. The host could finally begin to heal. I turned around and walked back into my house. I closed the door and locked it. The silence inside was different now. It was not empty. It was victorious. The air inside the First National Bank of Brooklyn was always 10 degrees cooler than the street outside. It smelled of floor wax and old money. I walked in at 10:30 in the morning. I was not wearing a suit this time. I was wearing my old work jacket and a baseball cap. To the casual observer, I looked like a man coming to cash a Social Security check, but the branch manager knew better. "Mr. Hayes, it is good to see you. Please come right this way." He ushered me past the line of people waiting for tellers and into his glass-walled office. I sat down in the leather chair. I did not waste time with small talk about the weather or the Knicks game. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I slid a platinum credit card across the mahogany desk. It was not my card. It was the supplemental card issued to Kendrick Hayes. "I need to close this account immediately," I said. The manager looked at the card and then up at me. He hesitated. "Mr. Hayes, are you sure? This card has a $50,000 limit. It has a significant balance pending from this month. If we close it, the entire amount becomes due immediately." "I know," I said. "Pay the balance from my primary savings. Then cancel the card. And cancel the card issued to Courtney Hayes as well." The manager typed on his keyboard. The clicking sound was the only noise in the room. He frowned at his screen. "Sir, I see a pending transaction right now on Mrs. Hayes' card. It looks like a pre-authorization at a restaurant called Le Coucou in Manhattan. Do you want me to let that go through before we cut it?" I leaned forward. "Number. Decline it. Decline everything." "But sir," the manager said, his voice lowering, "if she is at the restaurant right now and the card is declined, it could be quite embarrassing." I looked the man in the eye. I remembered the note on my kitchen counter. I remembered the locksmith drilling my door. I remembered my own son trying to have me committed to a mental institution less than 3 hours ago. "Decline it," I said, "and mark the account as closed by request of the primary account holder. I want the rejection to be absolute." The manager nodded slowly. He typed a final command and hit enter. "It is done, Mr. Hayes. The cards are dead." I stood up and shook his hand. I felt a grim satisfaction. Cutting off the money was easier than cutting off the love, but it was necessary. I walked out of the bank into the bright sunshine. I had just severed the financial artery that kept their lifestyle alive. Now I just had to wait for the patient to go into shock. At that exact moment, 5 miles away in Soho, Courtney was sitting at the best table in Le Coucou. She was surrounded by 3 of her closest friends, women, who measured their self-worth by the labels on their handbags and the zip codes of their summer homes. They were laughing and drinking champagne, celebrating Courtney's upcoming renovation of my brownstone. I can picture the scene perfectly because I saw the receipt for the champagne later, and I know exactly how Courtney operates. She would have been holding court telling them how generous she was for helping her senile father-in-law move into a facility. Oh, it is for the best, she probably said, sipping her $30 glass of wine. Caleb just cannot manage that big house anymore. Kendrick and I are doing him a favor, really. We are going to turn the top floor into a master suite. It will be divine. The waiter arrived with the bill. It was lunch, but the total was over $400. Courtney smiled that tight, practiced smile of hers and waved her hand dismissively. I have got this, ladies, she said, pulling out the platinum card I paid for. It is the least I can do since you all listened to my drama this morning. She handed the card to the waiter. He walked away. The conversation continued. They talked about Pilates and private schools. 5 minutes later, the waiter returned. He was not smiling. He leaned down close to Courtney's ear, trying to be discreet. But in a quiet restaurant, discretion is impossible. Ma'am, I am sorry, but the card was declined. Courtney laughed. That is impossible. Try it again. It is probably the chip. It is a platinum card. I tried it 3 times, ma'am. The waiter said, his voice a little louder now. The system says the account has been closed by the issuer. Do you have another form of payment? The table went silent. The other women exchanged glances, the kind of glances that said, I told you they were living beyond their means. Courtney felt the heat rise up her neck. She dug into her purse. She pulled out another card. This one was a joint debit card she shared with Kendrick. Use this one, she snapped, and I will be speaking to your manager about your machine. The waiter took the second card. He came back in 30 seconds. Declined again, ma'am. Insufficient funds. Courtney's face turned the color of ash. She did not know that I had frozen the joint account transfers as well. She was sitting in a 5-star restaurant with a zero-balance reality. She grabbed her phone. She dialed Kendrick. She needed him to fix this. She needed him to yell at someone. But Kendrick did not answer. He was standing on a sidewalk in Brooklyn watching his car being towed away. Courtney dialed again. Voicemail. The waiter was still standing there holding the bill. The other patrons were starting to look. The silence at the table was suffocating. Is everything okay, Courtney? One of her friends asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. Do you need me to cover it? Courtney looked at her friend. To accept charity from her was a fate worse than death. But she had no choice. I think my father-in-law must have messed up the accounts, she stammered. He is losing his mind, you know. He probably canceled the wrong things. Yes, please pay it. I will Venmo you. She did not Venmo her. She could not. She had no money. She walked out of that restaurant stripped of her pride, knowing that by dinner time, the story of her decline would be circulating through every group chat in her social circle. While Courtney was facing her social execution, Kendrick was seeking refuge. After the tow truck took his car, he did not go to his office. He could not face his employees. He needed a place to think, a place to regroup. He took a cab to a small, nondescript commercial building near the Navy Yard. This was the headquarters of Hayes Automotive Consulting. It was my old office. Kendrick had not been there in years. He thought of it as a dusty relic, a place where his old man tinkered with engine blueprints. He had his own shiny glass-walled office in Dumbo for his creative agency. But today he did not feel like a creative director. He felt like a frightened child. He used his old key to open the back door. I had not changed these locks yet. It was an oversight on my part, or perhaps subconsciously I wanted him to see what he was about to see. The office was quiet. It smelled of oil and paper. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Kendrick collapsed into my old swivel chair. He put his head in his hands. He was angry. He was humiliated. He wanted to find something, anything that he could use against me. He started opening drawers. He was looking for dirt, maybe unpaid tax bills, maybe evidence that I was actually senile. He wanted leverage. He pulled open the bottom drawer of the metal filing cabinet marked confidential. Inside were manila folders. He grabbed a thick one labeled Capital Ventures 2023. He opened it. He expected to see receipts for car parts or consulting invoices for a few $1,000s. Instead, he saw a spreadsheet. His eyes widened. He ran his finger down the column. Investment A, $2 million. Investment B, $1.5 million. Quarterly return, $400,000. Kendrick blinked. He flipped the page. He found a document titled Angel Investor Agreement. It was for a tech company that Kendrick read about in the news every day, a company that was currently trading on the NASDAQ, and there at the bottom of the page was the signature, Caleb Hayes, He kept digging. He found deed after deed, warehouses in Queens, commercial lots in Jersey. The portfolio was staggering. He found the file for his own company, Kendrick Creative. He opened it expecting to see the loan documents from the bank. Instead, he found a promissory note. The bank he used was just a front. The funds were guaranteed by the Esther Hayes Trust. He dropped the file on the desk. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light coming through the dirty window. Kendrick looked around the shabby office with new eyes. He had always looked down on me. He thought I was just a blue-collar worker who got lucky with one house. He called me simple. He called me outdated. He realized now that while he was playing dress-up in his fancy suits, I was building an empire in denim. He had just declared war on a man who could buy and sell him 10 times over before breakfast. He pulled out his phone. He looked at the text messages from Courtney. My card was declined. Everyone laughed at me. "Where are you? We are ruined. Fix this, Kendrick." Kendrick stared at the phone. He looked at the millions of dollars on paper spread out before him. He felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He had not just burned a bridge. He had bombed the bank. He stood up, his legs shaking. He had to talk to me. He had to apologize. Not because he was sorry, but because he was terrified. He grabbed the files and shoved them into his bag. He needed proof. He needed to understand the scope of what he had lost. He ran out of the office, leaving the door unlocked behind him. He did not know that the next time he saw me, I would not be the father he thought he could manipulate. I would be the CEO he had just fired, and I was coming for his severance package. Courtney was a strategist of the worst kind because she weaponized empathy. After her humiliation at the restaurant, she did not go home to reflect on her choices or to comfort her husband. She went to war. But this was not a war fought with lawyers or police officers anymore. She knew those avenues were blocked by the iron wall of my documentation. So she turned to the one court where evidence matters less than emotion. She turned to the court of public opinion. I sat in my study on the second floor with the lights off. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, but I did not need to look out the window to see what was happening on my front stoop. I had the high-definition feed from the security cameras streaming directly to my iPad. I watched as a taxi pulled up to the curb. It was not the luxury SUV she was used to, but it served her narrative better. Courtney stepped out. I zoomed in on the image. I had to admire her commitment to the role. Gone were the oversized designer sunglasses and the arrogant posture she had displayed this morning. She had removed her diamond earrings. She was wearing a simple gray sweatshirt that looked 2 sizes too big, making her appear frail and small against the backdrop of my imposing brownstone. Her face was pale. I knew Courtney well enough to know she had likely scrubbed off her bronzer and applied a foundation 2 shades too lighter than her skin tone to simulate exhaustion and malnutrition. But what made my blood run cold was not her costume change. It was who she dragged out of the back seat. It was Leo, my 5-year-old grandson. He looked confused. He was holding his favorite stuffed dinosaur, the one I had bought him for his 3rd birthday. He was rubbing his eyes. Courtney crouched down to his level on the sidewalk. I could not hear what she was saying through the camera, but I saw her gestures. She smoothed his hair. She pointed at my front door. She pulled the corners of her mouth down, mimicking a sad face, and then nodded encouragingly when Leo imitated her. She was directing him. She was coaching a toddler to play the role of a homeless orphan. She pulled out her phone and attached it to a small handheld ring light tripod she carried in her purse. She adjusted the angle. She positioned herself and Leo so that the massive oak doors of my house loomed over them like the gates of a dungeon. She wanted the shot to look oppressive. She wanted to look like David facing Goliath. I saw the notification pop up on my own phone. Courtney Hayes is live. I tapped the notification. The screen on my iPad split. On the left was the raw security footage showing the reality of a woman manipulating a child. On the right was the Instagram live feed showing the filtered performance she was broadcasting to the world. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera, her voice trembling with practiced perfection. "I am sorry I look like a mess. I have not slept. I do not even know if I should be sharing this, but we have nowhere else to go." She pulled Leo closer into the frame. He looked at the camera with big innocent eyes. "Say hi to the people," Leo Courtney cooed. "Hi," Leo said quietly. "We are standing in front of Grandpa Caleb House," she continued, wiping a dry tear from her cheek. "We came here because we have no food, and we have been locked out of our own home. My father-in-law, he is—" She paused, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. "He is having a really hard time mentally. He has become paranoid and aggressive. He changed the locks while we were out. He took our car, and now he won't let his own grandson inside to use the bathroom or get a snack." The comments began to fly up the side of the screen. Heartbroken emojis, angry faces. What a monster. Call the cops immediately. How can someone do that to a child? Stay strong, Courtney. We are here for you. I watched the viewer count tick up. 50 people, 100 people, 300 people. She was viral baiting. She was painting a portrait of a senile, abusive tyrant hoarding wealth while his family suffered on the street. I am scared, guys, she whispered, looking back at my door. We just want to get Leo his medicine and some clothes. I do not care about myself, but please pray for us. She turned to Leo. Leo, tell Grandpa you are hungry, baby. Tell him you want to come inside. Leo looked at the door, then back at the phone. I am hungry, he said obediently. Grandpa opened the door. My hand hovered over the iPad. My chest tightened. This was the most painful moment of the entire ordeal. That was my blood down there. That was the little boy I had taught to fish just last summer. I remembered the way his small hand felt in mine. I remembered his laugh. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run downstairs, throw open the bolts, and scoop him up. I wanted to feed him. I wanted to give him warm milk and tell him everything was going to be all right. Courtney knew this. She was banking on my weakness. She knew that Caleb the businessman was ruthless, but Caleb the grandfather was soft. She was holding a knife to my heart and using my love for that boy as the blade. I stood up and walked to the door of the study. I could go down there. I could open the door. I could end the scene. But if I did that, she won. If I opened that door, I was validating her lie. I would be admitting that I was the one causing the pain. I would be letting the parasite back into the host. And worse, I would be teaching Leo that manipulation works. I would be teaching him that lies are a valid currency. I stopped. I looked at the screen again. I saw Courtney glancing down at her phone, checking the viewer count, a flash of triumphant greed in her eyes that the camera missed, but I saw. She did not care about Leo's hunger. If she did, she would have bought him a sandwich with the cash in her purse instead of a ring light. She was using him as a prop. I walked back to my desk. I did not go downstairs. I reached for the console that controlled the smart home system. I pressed the button for the external intercom. The speakers were embedded in the stone archway of the front porch, hidden from view, but powerful enough to be heard clearly over the traffic. I watched the screen. Courtney was in the middle of a sob story about having no money for a hotel. I leaned into the microphone. "Courtney," I said. My voice boomed out onto the street, amplified and deep. It caught her off guard. She jumped. Leo looked up, surprised. Courtney froze. She looked at the door. She did not know whether to cut the feed or keep filming to capture my supposed aggression. She chose to keep filming, hoping I would sound crazy. Grandpa Courtney said to the camera, pitching her voice high and sweet. "Grandpa, is that you? Please let us in. Leo is cold." I kept my finger on the button. My voice was steady, devoid of the anger she wanted. It was the voice of a judge delivering a verdict. "Courtney, you are broadcasting live to 500 people," I said, "so make sure you tell them the truth. Tell them about the restaurant." "What?" Courtney stammered, looking panicked. "I do not know what you are talking about. We have no money, Caleb. You cut us off." I looked at the notes I had made from the bank report. "Tell your audience about the Hermes Birkin bag hanging on your shoulder," I said. "The one you are trying to hide behind your back. That bag cost $12,000. Courtney instinctively shifted, trying to cover the strap of the bag she had forgotten to take off. The camera caught the movement. The comments on the screen slowed down. People were confused. "I bought that bag for you last month, Courtney," I continued. "It was supposed to be money for my heart medication, but you said you needed it for networking. You are standing there wearing $12,000 worth of leather, claiming you cannot feed your son." "That is a lie," she shrieked, forgetting her soft victim voice. "This is a knockoff. You are crazy." "And tell them why the car was towed," I added relentlessly. "Tell them it was because your husband tried to steal a company vehicle after I legally evicted him for threatening to put me in a home." Courtney looked at the phone. The comments were turning. "Wait, is that a real Birkin? Why does she have a ring light if she is homeless? Show us the bag, Courtney." "This feels staged." The tide was shifting. The audience could hear the sanity in my voice, and they could see the cracks in her performance. "Go home, Courtney," I said. "Go to your mother's house in Jersey. You have money for a taxi. I saw you withdraw $500 cash from the ATM yesterday before I froze the accounts. Use that to feed my grandson instead of using him as a prop for your internet fame." Courtney stared at the intercom speaker. Her face went through a transformation that was terrifying to behold. The mask of the sad mother dissolved. Her lips pulled back in a snarl. Her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. She looked down at the phone. The comments were now mocking her. Scammer. Leave the old man alone. Child services should see this. She tapped the screen, furiously ending the live stream. The second the camera was off, the act vanished completely. She looked up at my window. She raised her middle finger. "Rotten hell, you old bastard!" she screamed. Her voice was so loud it frightened Leo. He started to cry for real this time. "Mommy, I want Grandpa!" he wailed. "Shut up, Leo," she snapped. She grabbed the boy by the arm. She did not hold his hand gently like she had for the camera. She yanked him. It was a rough, violent motion. Leo stumbled, trying to keep up with her as she stomped down the stairs. "Stop crying," she hissed at him, oblivious to the fact that I was still recording on the security system. "You are useless, just like your father." I watched them reach the sidewalk. She hailed another taxi, shoving Leo inside like a bag of laundry. She looked back at my house one last time, her face twisted in hate. I released the button on the intercom. My hand was shaking now, not from fear but from rage. I had won the battle. I had exposed her. But the cost was high. I had watched the innocence of my grandson be shattered by the woman who was supposed to protect him. I saved the video file. I backed it up to the cloud. I renamed the file Evidence of Unfitness. I sat there in the dark for a long time, staring at the empty sidewalk on the screen. I poured myself another drink, but I did not drink it. I just held the cold glass against my forehead. The silence in the house was no longer victorious. It was heavy with the knowledge that this was far from over. A wounded animal is dangerous, but a humiliated narcissist is lethal. And Courtney had just been humiliated in front of the only people she cared about, her followers. She would not stop. She would escalate. And I had to be ready. While I sat in my study reviewing security footage, my son and his wife were busy across town drafting the script for my demise. I know exactly how the meeting went because I later read the transcripts of their deposition, and I saw the billable hours charged to the credit card they tried to use before realizing it was dead. They went to the office of Mr. Stone, a lawyer whose billboards lined the highway near the airport. He was the kind of attorney who chased ambulances and specialized in bitter divorces. He was a vulture in a pinstripe suit, and Kendrick and Courtney were the fresh meat he had been waiting for. They sat in his office, which smelled of stale cigar smoke and desperation. Kendrick did most of the talking at first. He spun a tale that would have been tragic if it were not entirely fabricated. He told Mr. Stone that his father was suffering from rapid cognitive decline. He described the incident with the locks not as a security measure taken by a prudent homeowner, but as a paranoid episode of a confused old man. He claimed that I had forgotten who he was, that I had become aggressive and violent without provocation. Courtney chimed in, adding her own poisonous details. She told the lawyer that I was spending money erratically. She cited the purchase of the new security system and the hiring of the locksmith as evidence that I was hemorrhaging their inheritance. She did not call it her inheritance, of course. She called it the family estate. She painted a picture of a man who was a danger to himself and others. She showed him the video of me speaking over the intercom, but she muted the sound so he could not hear my rational words, only see my imposing figure looming over the street. Mr. Stone listened and nodded. He did not care about the truth. He cared about the asset. He looked up the property value of my brownstone. He saw the millions of dollars in equity. He saw the potential for a massive guardianship fee. He told them exactly what they wanted to hear. He told them that New York State had laws to protect the elderly from themselves. He used words like conservatorship and incompetence. He explained that if they could prove I was mentally unfit, the court would grant Kendrick full control over my finances, my medical decisions, and my property. They drafted the petition right there. They listed specific incidents of my alleged insanity. Incident 1, changing locks due to paranoia. Incident 2, theft of a vehicle due to confusion about ownership. Incident 3, public harassment of a minor. They took every defensive move I had made and twisted it until it looked like a symptom of a disease. They were not just suing me. They were trying to erase me. They were trying to legally declare that Caleb Hayes, the man who built engines and empires, no longer existed, and in his place stood a child who needed to be managed. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. It was not a friend. It was a process server. He was a young man barely 20 who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. He asked me to confirm my identity. I did. He handed me a thick manila envelope and mumbled an apology before hurrying down the steps. I took the envelope into the kitchen. I did not open it immediately. I made myself a cup of tea. Earl Grey hot. I sat at the head of the dining table. The house was quiet. The sun was shining through the sheer curtains, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. It was a peaceful setting for a declaration of war. I slid my finger under the flap of the envelope and pulled out the stack of papers. The header was in bold black ink. State of New York Family Court. Petition for appointment of a guardian for an incapacitated person. I read the words. Incapacitated. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I read the sworn affidavit signed by my son and daughter-in-law. I read the lies they had codified into legal arguments. They claimed I could not bathe myself properly. They claimed I forgot names. They claimed I had violent outbursts. Reading it was a physical sensation, like being punched in the gut over and over again. My first instinct was rage. I wanted to tear the papers into confetti. I wanted to drive over to their hotel and scream the truth until my throat bled. I wanted to break things. But I did not. I remembered what my father taught me when I was learning to box at the community center. When you get hit, you do not flail. You breathe, you assess, you wait for the opening. I stood up and walked to my office. I took a 3-hole punch from the drawer. I aligned the court documents perfectly. I pressed down. The sharp crunch of the metal cutting through the paper was satisfying. I opened a fresh binder. It was a black binder, sturdy and thick. I had already labeled the spine. I did not label it lawsuit or Kendrick. I labeled it target. I filed the summons as the first document. Then I filed the printout of the bank record showing their spending. Then I filed the receipt for the locksmith. Then I filed the digital copy of the intercom video. I was not building a defense. I was building a weapon. I closed the binder and ran my hand over the cover. They wanted a fight about my mental capacity. I would give them a masterclass in memory and focus. That evening, I put on my best charcoal suit. I wore the gold cufflinks that my wife Esther had given me for our 25th anniversary. I called a car service. I was not going to hide in my house. I was going to dinner. I arrived at the Red Rooster in Harlem, a place where the history of our people covered the walls and the smell of cornbread and braised short ribs felt like a hug. I walked to the back booth, the private one usually reserved for local politicians and celebrities. Sitting there sipping a glass of red wine was Althea Vance. Althea was 60 years old and sharp as a razor blade. We had gone to Howard University together back in the day. She had become one of the most feared estate attorneys in the city. She was wearing a red blazer that signaled she was not in the mood for nonsense. When she saw me, she did not offer pity. She offered a smile that was all teeth. "Caleb," she said, sliding a glass of wine toward me. "I read the petition you sent over. It is a work of fiction. I have seen better plots in daytime soap operas." I sat down and took a sip of the wine. It was a heavy Cabernet, rich and complex. "They are going for the jugular, Althea," I said. "They want everything. The house, the trust, the power of attorney. They want to put me in Shady Acres and sell the brownstone before the ink is dry." Althea laughed. It was a low, throaty sound. "Let them try. They have made a critical error, Caleb. They assumed you would hire a regular defense attorney. They assumed you would try to settle to keep this private." I cut into my steak. It was cooked perfectly medium rare. "I am not settling, Althea. I want to destroy them." Althea nodded, her eyes gleaming. "And that is why we are going to play this differently. Most lawyers would file a motion to dismiss immediately. They would show the evidence that you are sane and the judge would throw it out. But that is too easy. That lets them off the hook with just a slap on the wrist." I looked at her, intrigued. "What do you propose?" "We let it go to a hearing," Althea said, leaning in close. "We let them stand up in open court. We let them swear under oath that you are insane. We let them submit their false evidence. We let them dig the hole so deep that they can never climb out." "You want me to let them humiliate me in public?" I asked. "I want you to let them commit perjury," Althea corrected. "Once they lie under oath on the record, we do not just win the guardianship case. We have grounds for criminal charges. We have grounds to revoke Kendrick's status as a beneficiary of the trust entirely for cause. We can strip him of everything legally and permanently." I sat back in the booth. The jazz band in the corner started playing a slow, moody rendition of Strange Fruit. I thought about the risk. If I faltered, if I lost my temper in court, the judge might believe them. But looking at Althea, I knew I was in the best hands in New York. "It is a trap," I said quietly. "It is a mousetrap." Althea smiled. "And they are two very hungry rats. We are going to put the cheese right out in the open. You are going to play the part, Caleb. Not the senile old man, but the hurt, confused father. Let them think they are winning. Let them get arrogant. And when Mr. Stone rests his case, we will drop the hammer." I raised my glass. "To the hammer," I said. Althea clinked her glass against mine. "To the hammer," she agreed. We spent the rest of the dinner mapping out the timeline. Althea listed the documents we needed: medical records from my own doctor proving my competence, affidavits from the bank manager, the footage from the security cameras. But we would not submit them yet. We would hold them back until the moment of maximum impact. This was not just a legal battle anymore. It was a chess match. Kendrick and Courtney were playing checkers, jumping pieces, and thinking they were clever. They did not realize they were sitting across from two grandmasters who had already calculated the checkmate in 12 moves. I finished my meal feeling stronger than I had in weeks. The food nourished my body, but the plan nourished my soul. I looked around the restaurant at the vibrant black joy surrounding us, the laughter, the music, the culture. I had built my life to support this community, to support my family. Kendrick had rejected that legacy. He wanted the fruit without tending to the roots. As I walked out of the restaurant into the Harlem night, I checked my phone. There was a missed call from Kendrick. I did not call back. I simply visualized him in court, sweating in his expensive suit as the trap snapped shut. The time for talking was over. The time for judgment was approaching. And unlike my son, I would be prepared. The courtroom smelled of lemon furniture polish and stale anxiety. It is a smell I have known all my life from business dealings and contract disputes, but today it smelled different. It smelled of betrayal. Room 304 of the Kings County Family Court was not a place for justice today. It was a stage set for a tragedy written by my own son. I sat at the defendant table next to Althea. She was cool and collected, arranging her papers with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Across the aisle sat Kendrick and Courtney. They had clearly been coached by Mr. Stone. Kendrick was wearing a navy blue suit that was modest by his standards, and he kept his head bowed, staring at his hands as if the weight of his father's illness was too much to bear. Courtney was wearing black, a simple dress that suggested mourning. She was mourning a relationship that was not even dead yet. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue every time the judge looked her way. The Honorable Judge Reynolds was a woman who did not suffer fools. She peered over her reading glasses at the packed courtroom. Mr. Stone called his first witness. It was Dr. Eris, a psychiatrist, who had never met me, who had never evaluated me, but who had been paid $5,000 to review the selective evidence my son provided. Dr. Eris sat in the witness stand, adjusting his tie every few seconds. He spoke with a rhythmic academic drone that was designed to sound authoritative. Based on the affidavits provided by Mr. Hayes and the video evidence of the erratic behavior, Dr. Eris said, consulting his notes, "It is my professional opinion that Caleb Hayes is suffering from rapid onset paranoid dementia. The changing of locks in the middle of the night suggests a deep-seated fear of persecution. The seizure of the vehicle suggests a confusion regarding property rights, and the public outburst over the intercom indicates a loss of impulse control. He is a danger to himself, and his estate requires immediate conservatorship." Kendrick wiped a fake tear. Courtney placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. It was a perfect performance. The judge looked concerned. She was scribbling notes. The narrative was taking hold. They were painting me as a broken machine that needed to be unplugged. Mr. Stone rested his case with a smug smile. He looked at me with pity, the kind of pity a butcher has for the cattle. Althea stood up to begin our defense, but I placed a hand on her arm. Her muscles were tense. She looked down at me, surprised. "Let me, Althea," I whispered. "Caleb," she warned, "this is risky. If you stutter, if you get angry, they win." "I will not stutter," I said. I stood up. I did not rush. Not. I buttoned my jacket. I pushed the chair back. The scrape of the wood against the floor was loud in the silent room. All eyes turned to me. Kendrick looked up, expecting to see me shaking, expecting to see me ranting. "Your Honor," I said. My voice was deep and steady, filling the room without the need for a microphone. "I would like to speak for myself, if it pleases the court." Judge Reynolds looked at me. She saw a man standing tall, not a man hunched over by age or confusion. "Proceed, Mr. Hayes," she said, "but I warn you, outbursts will not be tolerated." I walked to the center of the room. I did not look at Kendrick. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I have been accused of paranoia because I changed the locks on my own home. Is it paranoia to secure his property after receiving a written threat from a family member stating they would no longer care for me and intended to sell my home? I pulled the plastic bag containing the charred remains of the sticky note from my pocket. I had saved the pieces I fished from the sink. It was not much, but it was enough. I have been accused of confusion regarding my vehicle, I continued. But the vehicle in question is registered to Hayes Automotive Consulting, a company I own. My son has no employment contract with this company. Is it confusion to reclaim corporate assets from a former employee who is using them for personal leisure while threatening the CEO? Mr. Stone jumped up. Objection. This is irrelevant. Overruled, Judge Reynolds said, leaning forward. Continue, Mr. Hayes. I turned to look at Dr. Aris, who was now sweating profusely. And finally, I have been accused of losing my impulse control because I spoke harshly to my daughter-in-law over an intercom. They claim I am a danger to my family. They claim I am unfit to be a grandfather. I walked back to the defense table and picked up my iPad. I handed it to the bailiff. I would like to submit into Evidence Defense Exhibit A. This is the unedited security footage from the incident in question. It includes the audio that the plaintiffs conveniently omitted. Kendrick went pale. Courtney stopped dabbing her eyes. She froze like a deer in headlights. The bailiff connected the iPad to the large monitor on the wall. The video began to play. The courtroom watched in silence as Courtney set up her ring light. They watched her coach little Leo to look sad. They heard her whisper instructions on how to manipulate the camera angles. Then came the voice, my voice, calm, rational, asking her to stop using the child as a prop, asking her to use the cash she had withdrawn to buy food. And then the finale, the moment Courtney turned off the stream. The courtroom speakers blasted her scream. Rot in hell, you old bastard. The judge flinched. The gallery gasped. But it was what happened next that sealed their fate. The video showed Courtney yanking Leo by the arm so hard he stumbled. It showed her screaming at a 5-year-old boy, telling him he was useless just like his father. I stopped the video. The freeze frame on the screen showed Courtney's face twisted in ugly hate contrasting with the terrified face of my grandson. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I asked, does that look like the face of a woman who is concerned about my mental health? Or does that look like a woman who is angry that her bank card stopped working? I am not crazy. Your Honor, I am just a father who finally decided to stop funding his own abuse. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Kendrick had his head in his hands. Courtney was staring at the table, her face red with a mix of rage and humiliation. Judge Reynolds took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at Dr. Aris, who was busy packing his bag, trying to leave before the hammer fell. She looked at Mr. Stone, who was suddenly very interested in the papers in his briefcase. Then she looked at Kendrick and Courtney. Her gaze was withering. Mr. Hayes. Mrs. Hayes, the judge said, her voice low and dangerous. In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen many frivolous lawsuits. But this is repugnant. You have wasted the court's time. You have perjured yourselves by submitting manipulated evidence. And worst of all, you have exploited a child and an elderly man for financial gain. She slammed her gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. Petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice. Kendrick flinched. Furthermore, she continued, I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay all legal fees for the defendant. And Mr. Hayes, I am referring this video footage to Child Protective Services. That display of aggression toward a minor is deeply concerning. Courtney let out a sob, but this time nobody cared. Get out of my courtroom, Judge Reynolds ordered, before I find you in contempt. Althea squeezed my hand under the table. We did it, Caleb, she whispered. I did not smile. There is no victory in watching your son be destroyed, even if he pulled the trigger himself. I gathered my papers. I placed them back in the binder. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I walked down the center aisle. Kendrick was standing up trying to gather his things. He looked at me. His eyes were red. He looked small. He looked like the little boy who used to break things and then hide behind the sofa waiting for me to fix them. Dad, he whispered. He reached out a hand. I do not know what he wanted. Maybe money. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe just acknowledgement. I stopped. I looked at his hand. Then I looked at his face. I did not yell. I did not lecture. I simply shook my head slowly. It was a small movement, but it carried the weight of 30 years of disappointment. I walked past him. I pushed open the double doors of the courtroom and stepped out into the hallway. The air was cooler out here. I took a deep breath. I was free. I was legally sane. I was legally in control. But as I walked toward the elevator alone, I felt the heavy burden of a truth I had tried to ignore for too long. My son was not a victim of circumstance. He was a bad man, and today I had finally stopped making excuses for him. The glass doors of Kendrick Creative in Dumbo, Brooklyn gleamed under the industrial lights. My son walked through them at 9 in the morning, less than 24 hours after being humiliated in family court. He walked with a strut that was entirely manufactured. He adjusted his expensive Italian tie and nodded at the young hip employees who were sitting at their communal desks, sipping oat milk lattes. Kendrick was trying to convince them and himself that the disaster in court was just a personal blip. He was trying to project the image of the unshakable CEO. I know this because I built that office. I did not build it with my hands like I built engines, but I built it with my capital. Every exposed brick wall, every ergonomic chair, and every Apple computer in that loft space was paid for by a silent injection of cash that Kendrick thought came from a mysterious group of angel investors in Silicon Valley. He called himself a self-made man. He gave interviews to design magazines talking about his grind and his vision. He believed his own mythology. He truly thought that his mediocre logos and marketing campaigns were generating the millions of dollars that kept the lights on. He walked into his corner office, which had a view of the bridge. He slammed the door shut and sat behind his desk. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his social media, trying to delete the negative comments that were still pouring in from Courtney's disastrous live stream. He was in damage control mode. He yelled at his assistant through the intercom, demanding coffee and a meeting with the finance team. He was going to pivot. He was going to launch a new campaign. He was going to prove to the world that he did not need his father. He did not know that his father was already in the building, or rather, his father, his sword, was in the building. At 10 o'clock sharp, the elevator doors opened and Althea Vance stepped out. She was not wearing the dark suit she wore in court. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit that made her look like an avenging angel. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a termination notice in the other. She did not stop at the reception desk. The young girl with the nose ring tried to stop her, but Althea just kept walking. Her heels clicked on the polished concrete floor with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. She walked straight to the glass office. She did not knock. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Kendrick looked up from his computer. His face flushed with anger when he saw her. "You have some nerve coming here," he spat, standing up. "If you are here to serve me with more legal papers, get out. My lawyer will handle it. This is a place of business, not a family therapy session." Althea closed the door behind her. She did not sit down. She stood in front of his desk, looking at him with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "I am not here, as your father is family lawyer, Kendrick," she said calmly. "I am here representing the primary shareholder of Kendrick Creative." Kendrick laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "I am the primary shareholder. I own 51% of this company. I founded it." Althea reached into her briefcase. She pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. She tossed it onto his desk. It landed with a heavy thud. "You own 51% of the operating stock," Althea corrected him. "But you seem to have forgotten who owns the debt and who holds the controlling interest in the capital investment group that funds your payroll." Kendrick looked at the document. He recognized the logo. It was the logo of Archangel Ventures, the firm that had given him his seed money 5 years ago. So what? Kendrick sneered. "Archangel Ventures loves me. They believe in my vision. Why are you representing them?" Althea leaned forward, placing her hands on the desk. "Because Archangel Ventures is a shell company, Kendrick. It is a subsidiary of the Esther Hayes Family Trust." Kendrick froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the information. "That is impossible," he whispered. "Mom is trust. But Dad said that was for charity. Your father is the sole trustee," Althea said. "He set up Archangel Ventures to support your dream because he knew no bank would give you a loan with your credit history. He has been injecting $50,000 a month into this company for 5 years. He has been paying your salary. He has been paying your rent. He's been paying for these fancy ergonomic chairs. Kendrick sank back into his chair. The color drained from his face. The illusion of the self-made man was dissolving in real time. He realized that every success he had ever claimed was actually a gift from the father he had just tried to declare insane. Althea opened the folder to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. Clause 13, she read aloud. The moral turpitude clause. If the CEO engages in conduct that brings public shame to the company or engages in legal action against the primary investor, the investor reserves the right to recall all loans immediately and cease all funding effective instantly. She looked up at Kendrick. Your stunt in court yesterday was a violation of Clause 13, and Courtney's live stream was a public relations disaster. You have breached the contract. So what does that mean? Kendrick asked, his voice trembling. It means the tap is dry, Althea said. She took out her phone and pressed a button. I just authorized the bank to claw back the remaining balance of the initial loan, and I have placed a freeze on the payroll account, which is funded entirely by the trust. Kendrick scrambled to his computer. He pulled up the company bank accounts. He refreshed the screen. His eyes widened in horror. The numbers were turning red before his eyes. The operating account, which had held $200,000 this morning, was now showing a negative balance. You cannot do this, he shouted. I have payroll on Friday. I have rent due. If I cannot pay my staff, they will walk out. Then you better start designing some very expensive logos very quickly, Althea said coldly. Because as of this moment, the Esther Hayes Trust is out. You wanted independence, Kendrick. You wanted your own life. You have it. Good luck keeping the lights on. Outside the glass office, the atmosphere was changing. The finance manager, a sharp woman named Sarah, knocked on the glass door. She looked terrified. She held a tablet in her hand. Kendrick, she called out through the glass. The bank just called. Our credit line has been revoked, and the payroll company says the transfer bounced. What is going on? Kendrick looked at Sarah, then he looked at Althea. He looked like a trapped animal. Tell them it is a mistake, he stammered. Tell them it is a glitch. Althea turned and walked to the door. She opened it and addressed the finance manager directly. It is not a glitch, she announced loud enough for the entire office to hear. It is a liquidation. Mr. Hayes has lost his funding. I suggest you all update your resumes. The office erupted. People stood up. Chairs scraped against the floor. Voices raised in panic. The cool, hip vibe of the design agency vanished, replaced by the frantic energy of a sinking ship. Kendrick ran out of his office. Everyone calm down, he yelled, waving his arms. I can fix this. I just need to make some calls. But nobody was listening. They were looking at their phones, checking their bank apps, seeing the pending deposits disappear. They looked at Kendrick with the same disdain Officer Davis had shown him the day before. They realized he was a fraud. Althea walked through the chaos. She did not look back. She walked to the elevator and pressed the button. Kendrick grabbed her arm just as the doors opened. Please, Althea, he begged, tears streaming down his face for real this time. Call Dad. Tell him I am sorry. Tell him I will sign whatever he wants. Do not let the company die. This is my identity. Althea pulled her arm away. She smoothed her jacket. Your identity was bought and paid for by a man you called a burden, she said. If you are truly a creative genius, Kendrick, now is the time to create a solution. But do not look to your father. He is busy planting flowers in his garden. The elevator doors closed, shutting out the sound of Kendrick's empire crumbling. I sat in my garden in Brooklyn, miles away, and felt the vibration of the fall. I did not feel joy. I felt a deep, hollow sadness. A father never wants to see his son fail, but sometimes you have to burn down the house to show the child that playing with matches has consequences. Kendrick was standing in the ashes of his ego. Now we would see if he had the strength to build something real, or if he would simply blow away with the wind. The check had cleared. The account was closed. The lesson had been delivered. The whiskey in the glass bottle was cheap, and it burned going down, but Kendrick did not care about the quality anymore. He sat in a dive bar near the Navy Yard, a place he would never have set foot in 48 hours ago. His Italian suit was rumpled and stained with sweat. His tie was undone, hanging around his neck like a noose. He had spent the last 6 hours drinking away the reality of his bankruptcy. He had tried to call his friends, but nobody answered. He had tried to call Courtney, but her phone was off. He was alone in a city that worshipped success, and he was now the face of failure. The alcohol did not numb him. It fueled him. It took his shame and twisted it into a hot, blinding rage. He sat there in the dark corner, staring at the bottom of his glass, and he constructed a new narrative in his head. In this version of the story, he was not a fraud. He was a victim. I was the villain. I was the jealous old man who stole his company. I was the tyrant who locked him out. I was the reason his wife left him. The more he drank, the more the lie felt like the truth. He slammed the empty glass onto the sticky wood of the table. He stood up, swaying slightly. He dug into his pocket and pulled out the keys to a rental car. It was a compact sedan, a dented gray box that smelled of stale cigarettes. It was the only thing he could afford with the cash he had left in his wallet. It was a humiliating step down from the luxury SUV I had repossessed, but tonight it was his chariot of vengeance. He stumbled out into the cool night air. It had started to rain, a slow, steady drizzle that turned the Brooklyn streets into slick black ribbons. Kendrick got into the car. He threw his phone onto the passenger seat. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He started the engine. He did not put on his seatbelt. He peeled out of the parking lot, cutting off a taxi driver who honked his horn. Kendrick screamed an obscenity out the window. He was done following rules. He drove toward Clinton Avenue. He drove fast, ignoring the red lights. He rehearsed what he was going to say to me. He was going to demand his company back. He was going to demand the keys to the house. He was going to show me that he was a man who could not be discarded. The alcohol whispered to him that he was powerful. It told him that if he just yelled loud enough, I would crumble. It told him that violence was a valid form of negotiation. By the time he turned onto my block, he was no longer my son. He was a dangerous stranger fueled by entitlement and ethanol. I was awake. I am always awake when it rains. The sound of the water hitting the slate roof of the brownstone usually brings me peace, but tonight it brought a sense of foreboding. I was sitting in my bedroom on the second floor reading a book about military history. The house was dark except for the small reading lamp on my nightstand. The silence was thick and heavy. Then I heard it. It started with the sound of an engine revving too high, a mechanical scream that shattered the quiet of the street. Then came the screech of tires braking hard against wet asphalt. Then the slam of a car door. I put my book down. I did not need to look out the window to know who it was. I knew that heavy, aggressive walk. I heard his footsteps pounding up the stone stairs. Caleb. The scream was guttural. It did not sound like Kendrick. It sounded like an animal in a trap. Open this door, you thief. Open this door or I will burn it down. I stood up. My movements were slow and deliberate. I did not panic. I did not rush. I walked to the closet and reached to the top shelf. My hand closed around the cold steel of my revolver. It was a Smith & Wesson waiting there for 20 years, oiled and loaded. I hoped I would never have to use it. I prayed I would never have to point it at my own flesh and blood. But tonight, hope and prayer were not enough. I checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. I walked out into the hallway. The pounding on the front door shook the entire house. The new oak door held firm, but the glass panels on the side were vulnerable. I am not leaving, he screamed. This is my house. You stole it from me. I picked up the phone in the hallway. I dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? My name is Caleb Hayes. I am at 420 Clinton Avenue. There is an intruder attempting to break into my home. He is violent and intoxicated. I am armed and I am in fear for my life. Please send officers immediately. I hung up. I did not stay on the line to answer questions. I had stated the facts. The recording would serve as my legal defense if things went wrong. I moved to the top of the grand staircase. I stood in the shadows. I could see the front door below, illuminated by the streetlights outside. I saw Kendrick's silhouette through the frosted glass. He was throwing his body against the wood. Suddenly there was a crash. The sound of shattering glass exploded through the foyer. A brick from the garden border landed on the hardwood floor, sliding across the rug. Kendrick reached his hand through the broken pane. He was trying to find the thumb turn for the deadbolt. He was cutting his arm on the jagged shards of glass, but he was too drunk to feel the pain. Blood smeared on the white paint of the doorframe. He found the lock. He twisted it. The door swung open. Kendrick stumbled into the foyer. The rain blew in behind him, soaking the rug. He stood there, panting, his chest heaving. He looked wild. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. He looked around the dark house, searching for a target. "Come out here, old man," he bellowed. "Stop hiding." I stepped forward from the shadows of the landing. The floorboard creaked under my weight. Kendrick looked up. He saw me. "There you are," he snarled. He started to move toward the stairs. "Stop right there, Kendrick," I said. My voice was not loud, but it stopped him. It was the voice of the man who had raised him, the voice of the man who had bailed him out of trouble a dozen times. But tonight it was also the voice of a man holding a loaded gun. I raised the revolver. I did not point it at his head. I pointed it at the center of his chest. My hand was steady. My heart was beating a slow, rhythmic drum against my ribs. "Take one more step and I will shoot you," I said. Kendrick froze. He blinked, trying to focus on the gun. He laughed a wet, ragged sound. "You won't shoot me," he said, taking a swaying step forward. "I am your son. You love me too much." I cocked the hammer. The metallic click echoed in the silence, louder than the thunder outside. "The son I loved died a long time ago," I said, my voice flat. "The man standing in my foyer is a stranger who broke into my house, and I have the legal right to defend myself. Do not test me." Kendrick looked at my face. He looked for the hesitation he was used to. He looked for the soft eyes of the father who always forgave. He found nothing. He found only the cold, hard stare of Caleb Hayes. Fear finally pierced through the alcohol fog. He stopped. He gripped the banister, his hand leaving a bloody smear on the polished wood. "Dad, please," he whimpered, his rage suddenly collapsing into tears. "I have nothing. I lost everything." "You did not lose it," I said. "You threw it away. Now get on your knees." He hesitated. "Get on your knees," I commanded, raising the barrel slightly. Kendrick sobbed. He slowly sank to the floor amidst the broken glass and the rainwater. He put his hands on his head. He looked small. He looked pathetic. But I did not lower the gun. I knew that a desperate man is a dangerous man, and I would not give him the chance to hurt me again. The blue and red lights flashed through the open door, painting the walls in a chaotic rhythm. I heard the sirens cut before the cars screeched to a halt. Officers poured out of the vehicles. I saw them running up the path, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the rain. Police dropped the weapon they shouted from the doorway. I did not drop it immediately. I slowly engaged the safety. I placed the gun on the floor at the top of the stairs. I raised my hands. "I am the homeowner," I called out calmly. "The intruder is on the floor in the foyer." 3 officers rushed in. They were aggressive. They saw the broken glass, the blood, the large man on the floor. They did not take chances. 2 of them tackled Kendrick, pushing his face into the wet rug. "Do not move," one officer shouted, kneeing Kendrick in the back. Kendrick screamed in pain. "Dad, help me! Tell them!" I stood at the top of the stairs looking down. I watched them pull his arms behind his back. I heard the distinct ratcheting sound of handcuffs clicking shut. It was a sound of finality. Officer Davis, the same officer from yesterday, walked into the foyer. He looked at Kendrick writhing on the floor. Then he looked up at me. He saw the gun by my feet. He saw the broken window. He understood the scene instantly. "Are you okay, Mr. Hayes?" he asked. "I am unharmed," I replied. He looked at Kendrick. "Get him up," he ordered the other officers. They hauled Kendrick to his feet. He was crying openly now, snot and blood running down his face. He looked up at me one last time as they dragged him toward the door. "Dad, why are you doing this?" he wailed. I did not answer. I did not look away. I watched him being pushed out into the rain. I watched him being shoved into the back of a police cruiser. I watched the door slam shut, sealing him in a cage of his own making. Officer Davis stayed behind for a moment. He looked at the blood on the doorframe. "We will need a statement, Mr. Hayes," he said gently. "And we will need to take the weapon for evidence since it was displayed during the incident." "Take it," I said. "I do not need it anymore. The threat is gone." I turned and walked back into my bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were finally starting to shake, not from fear but from the adrenaline leaving my body. I looked at the empty space in the room. I was alone, truly alone. But as I listened to the rain falling on the roof, I realized that loneliness was a price I was willing to pay for peace. I laid back on the pillows and closed my eyes. The nightmare was over. Tomorrow I would clean up the glass. Tomorrow I would wash the blood off the floor. But tonight I would sleep. With Kendrick sitting in a holding cell at the Brooklyn precinct, Courtney realized that her human shield was gone. For the first time in her adult life, she was completely exposed. I imagine she spent that night in a state of cold calculation rather than mourning. She was staying at her mother's small apartment in New Jersey, a place she despised because it reminded her of where she came from. She sat on the edge of the twin bed she had slept in as a teenager and stared at her phone. The bank apps all showed red zeros. The credit cards were dead plastic. Her husband was facing felony charges for breaking and entering in possession of a weapon. The narrative she had spun on social media had backfired, leaving her with no allies and a comment section full of strangers calling her a grifter. She needed a new angle. She needed something that superseded legal contracts and restraining orders. She needed a biological tether that I could not cut. She needed a hostage that I would actually care about. She knew that despite my ruthlessness regarding money, I had a soft spot for family. She knew how much I loved Leo before she turned him against me. She calculated that the only thing powerful enough to make Caleb Hayes open his checkbook again was the promise of a new legacy. She opened her laptop. She did not search for divorce lawyers or job applications. She searched for ultrasound images. It is terrifyingly easy to fake a pregnancy in the digital age. There are websites dedicated to it providing customized sonograms with your name and hospital dates printed neatly at the top. Courtney spent $40 on a rush order. She chose an image that showed a healthy 12-week fetus. She printed it out on high-quality glossy paper. She held it in her hand and smiled. To her, it was not a lie. It was a winning lottery ticket. She practiced her speech in the mirror. She practiced the subconscious hand on the belly. She practiced the look of a woman who is terrified for the future of her unborn child. She was not preparing for a reconciliation. She was preparing for a hostage negotiation. She texted me the next morning. "We need to talk. It is not about Kendrick. It is about the future of your family." I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop on Atlantic Avenue. It was neutral ground, public. Noisy enough to mask a conversation, but quiet enough to record one. I arrived 15 minutes early. I sat in a booth with a clear view of the door. I ordered a black coffee and placed my phone on the table face down, but with the voice memo app running. Courtney arrived exactly on time. She had changed her appearance again. The aggressive fashionista from the eviction day was gone. The weeping victim from the live stream was gone. Today she was playing the role of the matriarch. She wore a loose-fitting dress and a cardigan. She walked slowly with a protective hand resting on her stomach. It was a subtle performance designed to trigger my protective instincts before she even said a word. She sat down opposite me. She did not order anything. She looked at me with wide, sorrowful eyes. "Thank you for meeting me, Caleb," she said softly. "I know you are angry. I know things have gotten out of hand." I did not respond. I just waited. Silence is the best way to make a liar talk. Courtney reached into her purse. She pulled out the glossy photo and slid it across the table. It landed next to my coffee cup. I looked down at the grainy black and white image of a fetus. "I found out yesterday," she whispered. "I was going to tell Kendrick as a surprise, but then everything happened with the arrest. I am 3 months along, Caleb. It is a boy." I looked at the photo, then I looked at her. I kept my face completely neutral. "You are pregnant?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "And I am scared, Caleb. With Kendrick in jail and the accounts frozen, I do not know how I'm going to feed Leo, let alone a newborn. I do not want to fight anymore. I just want to make sure this baby has a home." She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled it back. "Does Kendrick know?" I asked. "I visited him this morning." She lied. "He cried when I told him. He wants to be a better father. He wants to fix things. But we need your help. We cannot raise this baby on the street." She paused, waiting for me to crumble. She expected me to pick up the photo and tear up. She expected me to write a check right there to secure the safety of my bloodline. I leaned back in the booth. "So what are you proposing, Courtney?" She straightened up slightly, sensing an opening. "I need the restraining order dropped," she said. "I need you to bail Kendrick out so he can find a job. And we need a place to stay just until the baby comes. Maybe we could move back into the brownstone. The top floor is empty. We would stay out of your way. We just need stability for the children." For the children. That was her shield. She was using an unborn child as a battering ram to break back into the fortress I had secured. I picked up the photo. I studied it. It looked real. But looking at Courtney, I saw the micro-expressions of a poker player waiting to see if the bluff landed. Her breathing was too shallow. Her eyes were checking my reaction too frequently. "I will take this into consideration," I said, sliding the photo into my pocket. "You will?" she asked, hope flaring in her eyes. "Yes," I said. "But if I am going to support this child, I need to be sure that you and the baby are healthy. My insurance policy covers prenatal care. I want you to see my doctor. Dr. Evans has been the family physician for 30 years. I will make an appointment for you tomorrow." Courtney froze for a fraction of a second. "Just a beat. Oh, I already have a doctor," she said quickly. "I really like her. I would prefer to stay with someone I trust." "I understand," I said, standing up. "But if you want my financial support, you see my doctor. It is a condition of the investment. Take it or leave it." I walked out of the coffee shop before she could answer. I walked straight to my car and called the number of a man I had used during my business days. A private investigator named Vance. "He was expensive, but he was invisible," Vance, I said when he answered. "I have a job for you. I need you to tail my daughter-in-law. She claims she is pregnant. I want to know what she eats, what she drinks, and exactly where she goes. And I want you to go through her trash." Vance worked fast. He was a man who understood that information has a shelf life. He parked his unmarked sedan down the street from Courtney's mother's house in Jersey. He watched. He waited. Courtney did not act like a pregnant woman. She did not rest. She did not go to prenatal yoga. 2 hours after our meeting, she left the house. She did not go to a pharmacy to buy vitamins. She went to a liquor store. Vance snapped photos with a long-range lens as she walked out carrying a brown paper bag. The shape of the bottle inside was unmistakable. It was vodka. She got into her mother's car and drove to a dive bar on the outskirts of Newark. It was a place with blacked-out windows, the kind of place people go when they want to disappear, or when they want to sin without judgment. Vance followed her inside. He sat at the bar nursing a soda, watching her in the reflection of the mirror. Courtney sat in a booth with a man I did not recognize. He looked like a lawyer, or maybe a bail bondsman. They were close, whispering. Vance watched as Courtney poured a clear liquid from a flask into her soda. She did it 3 times in an hour. Then she pulled out a pack of cigarettes. She lit one, inhaling deeply, blowing a cloud of smoke into the stale air. Vance took photos of everything. The flask, the cigarettes, the lack of a baby bump which seemed to have vanished since she took off the loose dress she wore to meet me. But the real gold was in the trash. That night while Courtney slept, Vance raided the garbage cans outside her mother's house. He found the receipt for the rush order of the fake ultrasound. He found sushi containers with raw fish. He found empty bottles of wine. He found a box for a at-home pregnancy test. It was open. The stick inside showed a single line, negative. Vance met me the next morning in my garden. He handed me a thick envelope. "It is all there, Mr. Hayes," he said. "She is drinking like a fish and smoking like a chimney. And here is the receipt for the fake sonogram website. She paid $40 for it." I opened the envelope. I looked at the photos of Courtney laughing in the bar, a cigarette in one hand and a drink in the other. I looked at the receipt. I felt a cold fury. It was not just the lie. It was the depth of the depravity. She was willing to invent a life just to secure a lifestyle. She was willing to look me in the eye and invoke the sanctity of family while she desecrated it. "This is enough, Vance," I said. "What do you want to do with it?" he asked. I put the photos back in the envelope. "I am going to give her exactly what she asked for," I said. "She wanted a meeting to discuss the future. We are going to have one. But she is not going to like the forecast." I paid Vance and went back inside. I called Althea. "Set up a meeting at your office," I told her. "Tell Courtney I am ready to sign the agreement for support. Tell her to bring her ID, and Althea have a notary present." "Why?" Althea asked. "Because I am going to make her sign a confession," I said, "or I am going to send her to prison for extortion." I looked at the fake ultrasound one last time before dropping it into the shredder. The paper screamed as it was sliced into ribbons. It was the only sound in the empty house, and it sounded like justice. The law offices of Vance & Partners are located on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. The view from the conference room is spectacular. You can see the entire city stretched out like a game board. It is a place designed to make people feel powerful or to make them feel very small. When Courtney walked in that Tuesday morning, she clearly felt powerful. She was wearing a pastel yellow maternity dress that flowed around her body. She had her hand resting protectively on her stomach, a gesture she had perfected over the last 48 hours. She walked with a slow, deliberate gait, the walk of a woman carrying the heir to a fortune. She did not look at Althea, who was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table. She looked at me. She smiled. It was a benevolent, forgiving smile. It was the smile of a woman who thought she had checkmated the king. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I did not smile back. "Please sit down, Courtney," I said, gesturing to the leather chair opposite me. She sat down gracefully, arranging her dress. She placed her handbag on the table. It was not the Hermes bag from the live stream. It was a modest tote bag. She was still playing the role of the humble mother in need. "I am glad we could meet, Caleb," she said, her voice soft and airy. "I know things have been difficult, but I am so happy you are willing to do the right thing for your grandson, or granddaughter. I have a feeling it is a girl." Althea cleared her throat. She pushed a crystal pitcher of water toward Courtney. "Water," Mrs. Hayes, Althea offered. "No thank you," Courtney said. "I am trying to limit my fluid intake. The baby is pressing on my bladder." It was a nice touch, a specific medical detail to sell the lie. I sat down and folded my hands on the table. The room was silent. The air conditioning hummed a low, steady note. "Courtney," I said, "I have thought a lot about what you told me at the coffee shop. You are right. Family is the most important thing. And if there is a child carrying the Hayes bloodline, that child deserves the best." Courtney's eyes lit up. She leaned forward slightly. "I knew you would understand," she said. "Kendrick and I just want a fresh start." I nodded. I reached for the black leather folder in front of me. I opened it. Inside was a document printed on heavy bond paper. It was 20 pages long. "This is a draft agreement," I said, sliding it across the polished wood. "Althea and I prepared it this morning. It outlines a comprehensive support package for you and the child." Courtney picked it up. Her greedy eyes scanned the pages. She did not read the clauses. She looked for the numbers. "Go to page 5, I instructed. She flipped the pages. Her breath caught in her throat. $5 million, she whispered, reading the figure. "That is the initial establishment for the child's trust fund," I explained. "It guarantees the child's education and health care for life. In addition, there is a monthly stipend of $20,000 for you as the primary caregiver, and the deed to a 4-bedroom house in New Jersey near your mother." Courtney looked up. Her face was flushed. She looked like she had just won the lottery. She was already mentally spending the money. She was decorating the house. She was buying the new car. She was imagining the look on her friends' faces when she reclaimed her status. This is generous, Caleb," she stammered. "I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything I said. You just have to sign." She reached for the gold pen sitting on the table. Her hand was shaking with excitement. But I interrupted, my voice dropping to a serious tone. "There is one condition." Courtney froze. The pen hovered over the paper. "What condition?" she asked warily. "Standard due diligence," I said. "This is a multi-million-dollar investment, Courtney. In business, we inspect the asset before we sign the check. In this family, we verify the bloodline." Courtney laughed nervously. She put the pen down. "Well, obviously, Caleb. When the baby is born, we can do a paternity test. I have no problem with that. I know it is Kendrick's." I shook my head slowly. "No, Courtney, not when the baby is born. Today." "Today?" she asked, her voice rising an octave. "What do you mean?" "You cannot test a fetus today. That is dangerous." "Actually," Althea spoke up for the first time, her voice sharp and precise. "Modern medicine is quite advanced, Mrs. Hayes. We have arranged for a specialist to perform an amniocentesis. It is a simple procedure. They extract a small amount of amniotic fluid. We can have a DNA match within 48 hours. Courtney went pale. She pulled her hand away from the contract as if it were burning hot. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No way. That is invasive. It carries a risk of miscarriage. I am not putting my baby at risk just because you are paranoid." I anticipated that objection, I said calmly. "That is why we hired Dr. Evans. He is the best in the city. The risk is less than 1%. And considering the financial security of $5 million, surely it is a risk worth taking to secure your child's future." "I cannot do it today," Courtney insisted, shifting in her chair. "I have to prepare. I have to talk to my doctor." "Your doctor is here," I said. I pressed a button on the intercom. "Send him in." The side door of the conference room opened. A man in a white coat walked in. He was carrying a medical kit. Behind him was a nurse pushing a small cart with an ultrasound machine. Courtney stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Panic was starting to set in. Real panic. "This is an ambush," she shouted. "You cannot force me to do a medical procedure. This is illegal." "Nobody is forcing you," Courtney, Althea said, leaning back in her chair. "It is entirely voluntary. But the offer on the table is contingent upon verification. No test, no money. It is that simple." Courtney looked at the doctor, then at the contract, then at me. She was cornered. She knew that if she let that doctor put an ultrasound wand on her stomach, the screen would be empty. The lie would be exposed in high definition. "I am leaving," she announced, grabbing her purse. "I will not be bullied. I will wait until the baby is born, and then I will sue you for everything you have. You will never see your grandchild, Caleb. I promise you that." She turned to storm out of the room. She reached for the door handle. "Sit down, Courtney," I barked. The command was so loud, so authoritative that she stopped instinctively. I said, "Sit down. We are not done." She turned around. Her face was a mask of defiance, but her eyes were terrified. "I am done listening to you," she spat. I reached into the folder again. This time I did not pull out a contract. I pulled out a large, glossy photograph. I slid it across the table. It was a photo of Courtney sitting in the dive bar. She was holding a cigarette in one hand and a glass of vodka in the other. The date stamp in the corner was from yesterday afternoon. Courtney stared at the photo. The defiance drained out of her face instantly. She slumped against the doorframe. I pulled out another photo. This one showed her pouring the flask into her soda. And this one I said sliding the photo of the trash contents across the wood. The receipt for the fake ultrasound, the negative pregnancy test, the sushi containers. Courtney did not move. She did not speak. She looked at the photos as if they were evidence of a murder. And in a way they were. They were evidence of the murder of her character. "You hired a private investigator," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "I did," I said. And he was very thorough. I stood up and walked around the table. I stood a few feet away from her. I wanted her to look me in the eye. "You came to me yesterday and lied to my face," I said, my voice low and hard. "You used a fake pregnancy to try and extort money from me. You used the legal system to try and steal my home. You used social media to destroy my reputation. And now you're trying to use a non-existent child to rob my estate. It was just... I was desperate," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "I did not mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to survive." "Extortion is a felony," Courtney Althea interjected. "Attempted grand larceny is a felony. Fraud is a felony. Based on the amount you tried to secure in this contract, you are looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison." "Prison," Courtney gasped. She looked at Althea, terrified. "You wouldn't. I am family. You ceased to be family the moment you tried to bury me," I said. I signaled to Althea. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a different document. It was a single page. Simple. Brutal. "This is not a support agreement," I said, pointing to the paper. "This is an uncontested divorce decree. It states that you are filing for divorce from Kendrick Hayes immediately. It states that you waive all rights to alimony. It states that you waive all claims to the Hayes estate, past, present, and future. And it grants full physical and legal custody of Leo to Kendrick with supervised visitation for you only." Courtney looked at the paper. "Custody," she cried. "You cannot take my son. You are an unfit mother, Courtney," I said. "We have the video of you abusing him on the sidewalk. We have the photos of you drinking while claiming to be pregnant. If we go to court, not only will you lose custody, you will go to jail, and Leo will end up in the foster system while Kendrick is in prison. Is that what you want?" Courtney shook her head violently. "No. No, please." "Then sign the paper," I said. "Sign it, and the photos disappear. Sign it, and I will not file charges for extortion. Sign it, and you walk out of here a free woman. You will be broke, but you will be free." Courtney looked at the pen. She looked at the photos of her drinking. She looked at the millions of dollars she had almost touched. She realized the game was over. The house always wins. And today, I was the house. She walked back to the table. Her legs were shaking so bad she almost fell. She picked up the pen. She did not read the document. She did not ask for a lawyer. She knew she had no leverage. She signed her name. Her signature was shaky, a scrawl of defeat. She dropped the pen. "Can I go now?" she asked, her voice hollow. I picked up the document. I checked the signature. I handed it to Althea for notarization. "One more thing," I said. Courtney looked up, her eyes dull. "If you ever come near my house again, if you ever mention the name Hayes on social media again, if you ever try to sell a story to a tabloid, this folder goes to the district attorney. Do you understand?" "I understand," she whispered. "Then get out." She grabbed her tote bag. She did not look back. She walked out of the office, a ghost of the woman who had walked in. She entered the elevator, and the doors closed on her ambition forever. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Althea came up beside me. "That was brutal," she said quietly. "It was necessary," I replied. I looked down at the street below. People looked like ants from up here. Courtney was now just one of them. She would have to find a job. She would have to learn to live within her means. She would have to survive without a host. I felt a weight lift off my chest. The toxicity was gone. The threat was neutralized. I had saved my estate, but more importantly, I had cleared the path for the only thing that mattered now: saving Kendrick. He was in a cell alone and broken, but he was my son, and now that the cancer had been cut out, maybe, just maybe, he could be healed. I turned to Althea. "Get the car," I said. "We are going to the precinct. It is time to bail him out." The sound of a jail cell door sliding open is not the sound of freedom. It is the sound of indifference. When Kendrick walked out of the precinct 72 hours after his arrest, he did not look like the man who had tried to break down my door. He looked like a ghost. He was wearing the same clothes he had been arrested in, but they were wrinkled and stained with the grime of a holding cell. He held a clear plastic bag containing his wallet, his keys, and his phone. He stood on the sidewalk blinking in the harsh afternoon sunlight. He looked around expecting a car to be waiting. He expected Courtney in a rental. He expected me in my truck. He expected a lawyer, but there was no one. The sidewalk was empty. The city moved around him loud and uncaring. He checked his phone. It was dead. He had to walk 3 blocks to a bodega to buy a charger with the crumpled cash in his pocket just to turn it on. When the screen finally lit up, he was bombarded with notifications, but none of them were the ones he wanted. There were no missed calls from his wife. There were only alerts from the bank about overdraft fees and emails from the landlord of his luxury condo. He took a subway to his apartment in Dumbo. He did not have money for a taxi. He sat squeezed between a construction worker and a tired nurse holding his expensive suit jacket in his lap, trying to hide the shame radiating off him. When he got to his building, the doorman who used to greet him with a smile did not open the door. He looked at Kendrick with pity and pointed to the service entrance. Kendrick took the freight elevator up. He walked down the hallway to his penthouse door. He reached for his keys. But before he could slide the key into the lock, he saw the sticker. It was bright orange and pasted right over the seam of the door frame. Notice of eviction. Possession of the premises has been returned to the landlord due to non-payment and breach of lease terms. He tore the sticker. He shoved his key in. It turned, but the door did not open. The locks had been changed. He pounded on the door. "Courtney," he yelled. "Courtney, open up." The door opened, but it was not Courtney. It was the building superintendent, a man Kendrick had ignored for 2 years. "She is gone, Mr. Hayes," the super said. "She hired a moving crew yesterday. She took the furniture. She took the art. She said you were going away for a long time." Kendrick pushed past him into the apartment. It was not just empty, it was gutted. The custom sofa was gone. The 80-inch television was gone. The closets were bare. Even the curtains had been pulled down, leaving the windows staring like blind eyes over the East River. He walked into the bedroom. The bed frame was there, but the mattress was gone. On the floor, in the middle of the empty room, was a single item. It was his wedding ring. Courtney had left it there like a piece of trash. Kendrick picked it up. He looked at the inscription inside. "Forever." He laughed. It was a dry, broken sound that echoed off the bare walls. He checked his phone again. He opened his banking app. 0. He opened his investment app. 0. He opened his email. There was a message from Althea Vance. Subject line: divorce. Decree and restraining order. He sat down on the floor. The setting sun cast long shadows across the empty room. He had no wife. He had no home. He had no company. He had no money. He realized for the first time in his life that he was not the protagonist of his own story. He was just a supporting character who had been written out of the script. The silence of the apartment was terrifying. It was the silence of a life that had been completely dismantled. He curled up on the hardwood floor, clutching his wedding ring, and he finally understood what I meant when I said I would cut the cord. I had not just cut it. I had pulled the plug on his entire reality. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the message. "Dad, it is me. I am staying at a hostel in Queens. I am not asking for money. I need to see you. Please. Meet me at Fort Greene Park, the bench by the monument." I deleted the message. I thought about ignoring it. But curiosity is a powerful force, and fatherhood is a terminal condition. I wanted to see the aftermath. I wanted to verify that the lesson had landed. I arrived at the park at noon. It was a beautiful day. Kids were playing soccer on the grass. Couples were walking dogs. It was the picture of normal life, a life Kendrick had always felt he was too good for. I saw him sitting on the bench. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His beard was patchy. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans that looked like they came from a thrift store. I walked up to the bench, but I did not sit down. I stood in front of him, blocking the sun. Kendrick looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He tried to stand up, but his legs were shaky. "Dad," he croaked. "Thank you for coming." I kept my hands in my pockets. I kept my distance. "You have 5 minutes, Kendrick," I said. "Tell me why I should not call Officer Davis and tell him you are violating the restraining order." Kendrick swallowed hard. He looked down at his cheap sneakers. "I know I messed up," he said. "I know that sounds like nothing compared to what I did, but I do not have other words. I lost everything, Dad. Courtney took it all. She even took my clothes. She told the police lies about me. I know I said. She told lies about both of us. But you were the one who invited her into the house. You were the one who gave her the ammunition." Kendrick nodded, tears spilling onto his cheeks. He was not sobbing for show like he did in the courtroom. This was the quiet, ugly crying of a man who has hit rock bottom. "I thought I was smart," he whispered. "I thought I was building something. But I was just spending your money. I was just pretending. And now, I am 32 years old and I do not even have a place to sleep. I am hungry, Dad. I am actually hungry." I looked at him. I remembered the boy who used to sit on my shoulders to watch the parades. I remembered the teenager who wanted to be an astronaut. Somewhere along the way, the world had convinced him that shortcuts were better than hard work. And I had enabled it. I had cushioned every fall until he forgot what the ground felt like. "You are hungry?" I asked. He nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Good," I said. He looked up, surprised by the cruelty of the word. "Hunger is a great teacher, Kendrick," I continued. "It clarifies things. It tells you what is important. Right now, you are realizing that a title like creative director does not put food in your stomach. You are realizing that a leased Range Rover does not keep you warm at night." "I am sorry, Dad," he wept. "I am so sorry for the lawsuit. I am sorry for the locksmith. I am sorry for everything. I just want to come home. Please, let me come home. I will sleep in the basement. I will do chores. Just do not leave me out here." I looked at the monument behind him. It was a memorial to martyrs who died for freedom. Freedom is not free. It is earned. "No," I said. Kendrick slumped his shoulders, defeated. "You cannot come home," I said firmly. "If I let you back into the brownstone now, you will never learn. You will just wait for me to die so you can take it again. You need to build your own house, Kendrick. You need to build your own life." "Then what do I do?" he asked, his voice rising in panic. "I cannot get a job. My reputation is ruined. The industry knows about the fraud allegations. Nobody will hire me." I reached into my jacket pocket. I did not pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a business card. It was greasy and bent at the corners. It smelled of motor oil and metal. I handed it to him. Kendrick took it. He read the name, Sal's Auto Repair. "Sal is an old friend of mine," I said. "He runs a shop in the Bronx. It is not glamorous. It is hot in the summer and freezing in the winter. He needs a guy to sweep the floors, change the oil, and scrub the grease off the engine blocks." Kendrick looked at the card, then at me. "You want me to be a mechanic?" he asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "No," I said. "You are not qualified to be a mechanic. A mechanic is a skilled trade. You are going to be a shop helper. You are going to be the guy who cleans the bathrooms." Kendrick stared at the card. "The pay is minimum wage," I said. "But Sal will let you sleep in the room above the garage if you work 6 days a week. It is a roof. It is a paycheck. It is a start." Kendrick looked at his soft, manicured hands. He had never held a wrench in his life. He had never scrubbed a toilet. "I cannot do that, Dad," he whispered. "I am a designer." "You were a designer," I corrected him. "Now you are a homeless man with a criminal record. You have 2 choices, Kendrick. You can take that card, take the subway to the Bronx, and learn what it means to work for a living. Or you can stay on this bench and wait for winter." I turned to walk away. I did not look back. I did not want him to see that my own eyes were wet. This was the hardest thing I had ever done. It is easy to write a check. It is agonizing to watch your child suffer. But I knew that if I saved him now, I would lose him forever. "Dad, wait," he called out. I stopped, but I did not turn around. Does Sal know who I am? He asked. He knows you are my son, I said. And he knows that if you are late one time or if you complain one time, he is to fire you immediately. Do not expect special treatment. Expect blisters. I started walking again. I walked out of the park and onto the busy street. I walked until my legs burned. I needed to distance myself from his pain. I hoped he would take the card. I hoped he would get on that train. But I could not force him. He had to choose to save himself. That evening I sat in my garden. I was potting new hydrangeas. The soil was cool and dark in my hands. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sal. The kid just walked in. He looks like he's going to throw up, but he picked up a broom. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. I typed back, "Do not go easy on him, Sal." "I won't," Sal replied, but I gave him a sandwich. He ate it like he had never seen food before. I put the phone down. I looked at the flowers. They need dirt to grow. They need rain. They need to struggle through the darkness to reach the sun. Kendrick was in the dirt now. It was up to him to bloom. I went back to my digging, feeling the first true peace I had felt in months. The parasite was gone. The man was beginning to form. The sound of a paper shredder is usually annoying, but on that Thursday morning in Althea's office, it sounded like a choir of angels. I watched as the old last will and testament of Caleb Hayes was turned into confetti. That document had been a mistake. It had been written by a father who thought love meant providing a cushion against the world. It had left everything to Kendrick unconditionally. It was a document that assumed my son would honor my legacy simply because he carried my last name. I watched the white strips of paper fall into the bin and I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. That old will was not a gift, it was a curse. It was the poison that had made Kendrick weak. Althea sat across from me, her pen hovering over a fresh legal pad. She looked at me with that sharp, intelligent gaze that I had come to rely on. "Are you sure about this, Caleb?" she asked. "This is a radical departure from standard estate planning. Most people just leave it in a trust or give it to a charity. You are trying to engineer a behavioral change from the grave." "I am not trying to engineer it, Althea," I said. "I am mandating it. I have spent the last week watching my son discover what hunger feels like. I have seen him humbled, but humility is like a coat of paint. It peels off if you do not prep the surface underneath. I need to sand him down. I need to make sure that when I am gone, he does not revert to the entitled child who thought he could sue his way to prosperity." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the skyline. "Write this down," I said. Preamble. I, Caleb Hayes, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all prior wills. I declare that the accumulation of wealth is a result of labor, and that wealth without labor is a poison that destroys the soul. Therefore, I refuse to poison my only son. Althea wrote quickly, her pen scratching against the paper. We moved on to the distribution of assets. This was the part where the family usually fights. This was the part Courtney had tried to steal. But Courtney was gone and Kendrick was currently scrubbing grease off a garage floor in the Bronx. The bulk of the estate, I said, my voice steady. The brownstone, the investment portfolio, the remaining cash reserves. It does not go to Kendrick. Althea looked up, waiting. It goes to the Esther Hayes Foundation, I said. We spent the next 2 hours outlining the bylaws of the foundation. It was exhaustive work. We defined the board of directors, ensuring that Kendrick would never have a seat on it. We defined the mission statement. We defined the investment strategy. I wanted to make sure that even after I was buried, my money would continue to work as hard as I did. Althea paused and took a sip of water. "Caleb," she said, "you are effectively disinheriting him. If you die tomorrow, he gets nothing. He is working for minimum wage. If he gets sick or if he loses that job, he will be on the street. Is that really what you want?" I looked at the shredder bin full of the old will. "No," I said. "I do not want him on the street. I want him on his feet." "There is a difference." I sat back down. "That brings us to the final clause," I said. "The Kendrick clause." I took a deep breath. This was the most important part. This was the part that would determine if my son would sink or swim. "Kendrick needs a safety net," I said, "but not a hammock. A hammock lulls you to sleep. A safety net only catches you if you are climbing high enough to fall." After we finished the draft, I told Althea I needed to take a drive. I needed to see where the money was going. I needed to visualize the future I was paying for. I drove my truck not to a bank, but to the campus of the City College of New York. It was where I had taken night classes 40 years ago. It was where I had learned the difference between torque and horsepower while working 2 jobs to pay tuition. I parked the truck and walked through the campus. The buildings were older now, the ivy thicker on the brick walls, but the energy was the same. I sat on a bench near the engineering building. I watched the students walking by. I saw a young man sitting on the grass. He was wearing a faded hoodie and cheap sneakers. He had a textbook open on his lap, and he was eating a sandwich wrapped in tin foil. He looked tired. I recognized that look. It was the look of someone who had worked a closing shift the night before and was running on caffeine and ambition. I saw a young woman carrying a backpack that looked heavy enough to break her spine. She was rushing to class, checking her watch, probably calculating if she had time to pick up her kids from daycare before her next shift. These were the people who understood the value of $1 because they had to bleed for every single one. They did not have fathers who bought them luxury SUVs. They did not have trust funds. They had grit. I watched them and I felt a surge of pride. These were my heirs, not by blood but by spirit. I pulled out my phone and called Althea. Add a specific stipulation to the scholarship fund, I said. Go ahead, Caleb, she answered. It is not just for tuition, I said, watching the boy with the foil-wrapped sandwich. I want a stipend for living expenses. I want a fund for tools. I want a fund that buys them a good suit for job interviews. And I want the criteria to include a work history. I do not just want the straight A students. I want the students who are working 30 hours a week while getting Bs. Those are the ones who will build the world, Althea. I heard Althea typing. Done, she said. Anyone else? No, I said. Now let us finish the Kendrick clause. I drove back to the office in the late afternoon. The sun was setting, turning the glass skyscrapers into pillars of fire. I felt a strange sense of peace. I was about to sign the document that would define my legacy. Althea had the final copy ready. It was printed on thick cream paper. It looked official. It looked permanent. I turned to the last page. Clause 14. The conditional beneficiary distribution. I read it aloud to the empty room just to hear how it sounded. Upon my death, Kendrick Hayes shall not receive a lump sum inheritance. Instead, he shall be enrolled in the Hayes Matching Program. I paused. The words were cold, legal, and perfect. The trust shall monitor the annual earned income of Kendrick Hayes as reported to the IRS. For every dollar that Kendrick Hayes earns through legitimate gainful employment, the trust shall match that dollar with an equal distribution. I looked at Althea. She was smiling a small, sad smile. It is brilliant, Caleb, she said. If he does nothing, he gets nothing. Exactly, I said. If he chooses to remain a shop helper making $30,000 a year, the trust will pay him $30,000. He will live a modest life. But if he chooses to go back to school, if he chooses to build a real company, if he chooses to work hard and make $100,000, the trust will pay him $100,000. And there is no cap? Althea asked. No cap, I said. If he becomes a millionaire on his own merit, I will match it. I will double his success. But I will not subsidize his failure. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy fountain pen. The ink was black and permanent. This is the kindest thing I have ever done for him, I said. I signed my name. Caleb Hayes. The signature was strong. It did not waver. I handed the pen to Althea. She notarized it. She stamped it with her seal. It is done, she said, closing the folder. I stood up. I walked to the window. I thought about Kendrick sleeping in that small room above the garage in the Bronx. I wondered if his back hurt. I wondered if his hands were blistered. I hoped they were. Pain is a signal, I whispered to the glass. It tells you that you are alive. I turned back to Althea. Send a copy to Sal, I said. Tell him to put it in an envelope and give it to Kendrick, but tell him not to open it until he has worked there for 6 months. Why wait? Althea asked. Because I want him to sweat first, I said. I want him to think he is doing it for survival. When he realizes he is doing it for his future, the lesson will be permanent. I walked out of the office. I took the elevator down to the street. The city was loud and chaotic, but I walked with the slow, steady rhythm of a man who has secured his borders. I had cut the rot out of my life. I had planted seeds for the future, and I had given my son the only gift that truly matters. I had given him the opportunity to become a man. I got into my truck and drove home. The brownstone was empty, but it was no longer lonely. It was waiting, just like I was waiting. Waiting for the day when Kendrick would knock on the door, not as a beggar and not as a thief, but as a man who could look me in the eye and show me his hands stained with the honest dirt of his own labor. Until then, I would tend my garden, I would drink my coffee, and I would sleep soundly knowing that my will was done. The sun in Florida hits differently than it does in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, the light always felt like it had to fight its way through the skyscrapers and the smog just to touch the pavement. Here on the Gulf Coast, the sun owns everything. It is a heavy blanket of gold that warms your bones and slows down time. It has been exactly 1 year since I walked out of that law office in Manhattan. 1 year since I signed the documents that dismantled my old life and laid the foundation for a new one. I bought a small house near Sarasota. It is nothing like the brownstone. There are no marble floors. There are no mahogany staircases. It is a simple one-story bungalow painted a soft yellow with a porch that looks out over the water. My days are simple now. I wake up when the sun comes up, not when an alarm clock rings. I drink my coffee on the porch, listening to the seagulls instead of the sirens. I bought a small boat. It is a used fishing boat, nothing fancy, but the engine purrs like a kitten because I tuned it myself. I spend my mornings out on the water. Sometimes I catch a red snapper. Sometimes I catch nothing at all. It does not matter. The point is not the fish. The point is the silence. For 30 years, my life was defined by noise. The noise of the factory floor, the noise of the city, the noise of Kendrick asking for money, the noise of Courtney complaining that nothing was ever enough. The silence out here on the water is the most expensive luxury I own, and I earned every second of it. I have made friends here. There is a group of retired men who meet at the marina for breakfast on Tuesdays. We talk about the tides. We talk about baseball. We never talk about our net worth. They know me as Caleb, the guy who tells bad jokes and makes good barbecue. They do not know I am a millionaire. They do not know about the trust fund or the lawsuits or the son who tried to declare me insane. To them, I am just another old man enjoying the sunset. And that anonymity is a freedom I never knew I craved. My health has improved. The doctor says my blood pressure is that of a man 20 years younger. It turns out that carrying the weight of ungrateful people on your shoulders is bad for the heart. Since I put that weight down, I feel lighter. I walk 3 miles a day on the sand. I sleep 8 hours a night. I have even started learning to play the guitar. My fingers are stiff, but they are learning. I am learning that life does not end at 68. It just changes gears. My phone buzzed on the patio table next to my glass of iced tea. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I knew who it was before I looked. It was Althea. She calls me once a month to give me the report. We have a rule. She does not tell me about the markets. She does not tell me about the brownstone, which is currently rented out to a nice family of architects. She only tells me about Clause 14. I picked up the phone. "Hello, Althea," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Hello, Caleb," she sounded cheerful. "How is the fishing?" "The fishing is terrible," I said, smiling. "But the weather is perfect. What is the news?" I could hear the smile in her voice. "I just got off the phone with Sal," she said. I waited. My heart did a little jump. No matter how much distance you put between yourself and your child, you never stop being a father. You just stop being a victim. "Kendrick is still there," she said. "It has been 12 months, Caleb. He has not missed a shift. Sal says he is the first one to open the shop in the morning and the last one to leave at night." I nodded to myself, looking out at the waves. "And there is something else." Althea continued. "He bought a car yesterday." I stiffened. A car. I thought about the luxury SUV. I thought about the leases I used to pay. "What did he buy?" I asked. "A 2015 Honda Civic," she said. "It has 80,000 miles on it. It has a dent in the rear bumper. He paid $6,000 cash for it." "6,000, I repeated. "Every penny came from his paycheck," Althea said. "He saved it. He lived on ramen and slept in that garage for a year to save that money. He did not ask for a loan. He did not use a credit card. He walked into the dealership in his work boots and bought it outright." I felt a lump form in my throat. It was not a lump of sadness. It was a lump of pride. It was a small victory. A used Honda is not a status symbol. It is a tool. It gets you from point A to point B. Kendrick had finally learned that a car is for transportation, not for validation. Did he ask about the trust? I asked. No, Althea said. He has not asked about money once. He thinks he is just surviving. He does not know the matching program is tracking every dollar. By the way, Caleb, based on his tax return for this year, the trust owes him $32,000. Keep it in the account, I said. Caleb, Althea warned. He earned it. I know, I said, but not yet. Let him drive that Honda for a while. Let him feel the pride of ownership. If we give him the money now, he might think he won the lottery. I want him to know he won the race. Give it another 6 months. Then send him a letter telling him about the match. You are a hard man, Caleb Hayes. Althea laughed. I am a loving man, Althea, I corrected her. I am loving him enough to let him become a man. We said our goodbyes. I put the phone down. I imagined Kendrick driving that dented Honda through the Bronx. I imagined him listening to the radio, his hands stained with grease on the steering wheel. He was probably tired. He was probably lonely. But he was free. He was no longer beholden to me or to Courtney or to anyone else. He was driving his own car, on his own gas, paid for with his own life. That is the only kind of freedom that no one can repossess. I walked down the wooden steps of my porch and stepped onto the sand. The tide was coming in. The water was a deep, calming blue. I stood at the edge of the ocean, letting the foam wash over my bare feet. I thought about the note Kendrick left on my counter that night. Don't expect me to take care of you in old age. I have my own life. He was right. He had his own life, and I had mine. For so long, I thought my job as a father was to be the safety net. I thought love meant never letting his feet touch the ground. But I was wrong. Love is teaching him that the ground is hard, but that he is strong enough to stand on it. I looked at the horizon where the sky met the sea. I thought about Courtney. I heard through the grapevine that she was working as a receptionist at a dental office in Jersey, living in a small apartment. She was surviving too. Without the lies, without the schemes, she was forced to be ordinary. And maybe in that ordinariness she would find some kind of peace. But mostly I thought about myself. I spent 68 years building engines and building fortunes. I built a family that cracked under pressure. But I did not break. I rebuilt the foundation. People ask me if I am lonely out here by myself. They see an old man living alone, and they pity me. They do not understand. Loneliness is sitting in a room full of people who only love you for what you can give them. Solitude is sitting on a beach knowing that everything you have is yours, and that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. I am not just waiting to die. I am living. I am breathing. I am the captain of my own ship. My son wrote that he would not take care of me, and that was the greatest gift he could have given me, because it forced me to remember that I am Caleb Hayes. I survived the assembly line. I survived the boardroom. I survived the betrayal. I do not need anyone to take care of me. I can take care of myself. I turned away from the ocean and walked back toward my little yellow house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the sand. I was ready for dinner. Ready. I was going to grill the fish I caught. I was going to drink a cold beer. And tomorrow, I was going to wake up and do it all over again. This is not a sad ending. This is a victory lap. And if you are watching this wondering if you have the strength to cut the toxic ties in your own life, let me tell you this. The view from the other side is beautiful. Hit like and subscribe if you agree that peace is worth the price. This is Caleb Hayes signing off. I used to believe that being a good father meant shielding my son from the harshness of the world. I thought my wealth was a blanket to keep him warm, but I realized too late that it was actually a blindfold keeping him from seeing the truth. The greatest lesson I learned is that you cannot buy respect and you cannot inherit character. Both must be earned in the fires of adversity. Cutting my son off was the most painful thing I ever did, but it was also the only thing that saved him. True love is not about giving your children everything they want. It is about giving them the tools they need to survive, even if one of those tools is the word no. Sometimes you have to let them break so they can learn how to put themselves back together stronger than before. If you agree that tough love is sometimes the only love that works, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about justice and redemption. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Kendrick sooner, or did I wait too long to offer him a second chance? See you in the next story.